if I use my power, I can even stop you from getting that job, and if you don't like it, just apologize to me." I couldn't help but laugh at his words. "Fine, go ahead and try," I said. "My name is Mary, and I'm a new mom struggling to adjust, but the person who should be struggling with me, my husband, isn't around to help." To be honest, I didn't fully see who my husband really was until I got pregnant. He's older than me by 6 years and was already a senior employee when we met. At work, he came across as smart, hardworking, calm, and kind. When he became my supervisor, we got to know each other better, which eventually led to marriage. I was still early in my career, but I was so in love with him and thrilled to marry someone I admired. In our company, it wasn't unusual for colleagues to marry. However, company rules didn't allow us to work in the same department after getting married. After a lot of discussion, it was decided that I'd transfer to another department. I had a patent attorney license, something I worked really hard to get in college. Thanks to that, I was able to move to the legal department at the head office. As a new hire, I spent my first year rotating between departments to learn how the company worked. That's how I ended up in the sales department, where my husband worked, but after our marriage, I was moved to legal earlier than planned. 5 years later, I wasn't feeling well and decided to visit the doctor. That's when I found out I was 4 months pregnant. We had been letting nature take its course, so this news made us happy, but as my pregnancy progressed into the second trimester, my morning sickness came back, and I had to take 3 months off work. That's when my husband's true nature came out. "Are you just lying in bed?" he'd ask. "I'm too anemic to stand up," I'd reply. "Then what about dinner? You're asking me to do that now?" When I was working, we shared all the housework equally, but as soon as I had to take leave, he left everything to me, even though I could barely function. "You're home all day, and you don't do a single chore. Can you please stop? You're making me feel worse." "That's not about anemia, that's a mental issue. You're just using your pregnancy as an excuse to be lazy." My husband would sit in the living room, watching TV at full volume, completely ignoring me while I lay in bed. Worse, he would leave the door to my room wide open, letting the noise from the TV flood in on purpose. "Please close the door," I'd ask, loud enough for him to hear, but he never listened. This was when I saw another side of my husband. He would sit in front of the TV, constantly criticizing the people on the screen. "Why is she even on TV? She's so ugly. Wow, look at how fat she is. That guy's got some nerve." He never stopped complaining, and it seemed like that was his way of enjoying TV. Fine, he could say whatever he wanted, but why did he have to keep the door open so I could hear it too? "Close the door, please," I repeated. But he ignored me. Just as before, the TV blared, and his constant grumbling filled the house. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, shut the door myself, and went back to bed, but before I could even get comfortable, he opened the door again. "Why did you open it?" I snapped. He didn't answer, just kept watching TV as if I wasn't even there. I had reached my limit. I called my parents and explained everything. My mom immediately told me to come home so I could rest and recover. The moment I arrived at my parents' house, I felt like I could finally breathe. It was the perfect place to heal. They made sure I had 3 healthy meals every day, and the house was calm and peaceful. My parents and my 2 younger sisters took care of me like I was fragile. Every day, my sisters would rush home from school to check on me. "How are you feeling?" they'd ask, their concern so genuine it made me tear up. Slowly, my health improved. I even started joining the family for meals in the dining room. "Lunch is ready," my mom said one day. "Thank you," I replied. "Do you mind if I turn on the TV?" "Go ahead," I said with a small smile. We sat together, watching a light-hearted show. My mom chuckled at the comedian on the screen. "This guy is hilarious. Once the baby's born and you're feeling better, we should visit this shopping arcade." Her laughter was so warm and natural that I started crying without realizing it. My mom noticed and looked at me, startled. "Why are you crying?" When I sniffled, my mom grew concerned. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" "No, I'm fine," I said, trying to hold back tears. "Tell me what's wrong," she urged gently. "I don't like living with Nico," I admitted. "Oh," she said, "why?" I opened up and told her everything. She listened quietly, without interrupting. "He keeps opening the door to my room on purpose, even when it's so loud, and when I close it, he just opens it again. He's always complaining about the TV. I want to laugh with him, The way I laugh with you. My mom frowned. That's not good, especially with a baby on the way. I can't stand the thought of him acting like this in front of our child, I said. You need to talk to him, my mom suggested. I don't want to see him anymore, I blurted out. Mary, you're going to be a mother. You can't just walk away without trying. You have a child to think about, she reminded me. You're right, I sighed. For the sake of my baby, I decided to have a serious talk with Nico. After recovering, I took only 2 months off work and then returned to my job. I also went back to the house I shared with Nico. When I got there, the house was surprisingly clean. It seemed like he had been managing fine on his own, except for one thing, the smell. Is this my pregnancy making me sensitive to smells? I wondered. But when I opened the door to my room, I saw the source of the odor. My room was a disaster zone. Garbage and dirty dishes were scattered everywhere. It was like a dump. Did he eat in here? I thought in disbelief. Just then, Nico came home. What, you're back? He said, looking annoyed. What's all this? I asked, pointing to the mess in my room. What's what? He replied carelessly. My room, why is it like this? Oh, that? It's your punishment for neglecting your chores, not taking care of me, and running off to your parents' house. I stared at him in shock. And by the way, he continued, you've gained weight, don't get any fatter, or I'll divorce you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You weren't like this before I got pregnant. Why are you acting this way now? I've always been like this, he said smugly, you just didn't notice. If you keep neglecting me, faking sickness, or running back to your parents, I'll punish you again, he added. And what about our child? I asked, desperate to find some reason in him. Huh? The baby, shouldn't we put our child first? He laughed mockingly, you're so stupid. Of course, I come first, the baby comes second. Now, go make dinner. That was the last straw. I'm moving back to my parents' house, I said firmly. Go ahead, he sneered, but you'll just get punished again. It was clear we couldn't have a real conversation. That was when I made my decision. I was done. I was going to divorce him. I went back to my parents' house and told them everything. I never expected things to get this bad, I said. What can I say? He's a twisted jerk, my dad muttered. No, he's a twisted scumbag, my younger sister chimed in. My family's support made me smile for the first time in a while. With their warmth and care, my baby and I were fine. Time passed, and I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Though I was told I could take a year of parental leave, with my mom's help, I returned to work after just 6 months. I worked hard for my son, determined to provide him with a good life. One day, on my day off, I decided to go back to Nico's house to finalize our divorce. When he saw me, he smirked and waved the divorce papers in front of me. I'm divorcing a fat wife like you. Here's the paperwork, he said, grinning wickedly. Perfect, I said, reaching for the papers. You're faster than I thought. Let's get it done. But before I could take them, he crumpled them up. What are you doing? I asked, annoyed. Wait, listen to me first, he said, looking desperate. What? Look at me. No, you just said you wanted to divorce me. Now let's do it. You won't be able to live without me, he declared. Actually, I've done just fine without you these past 6 months. Life has been peaceful. I'm a salesman, he shouted. So? I bring work to the company. Without me, none of you would even have jobs. Are you serious right now? I asked, rolling my eyes. A company is only as good as its salespeople. You should respect me. Okay, I said, pulling out the divorce papers from my bag. Just sign these. He grabbed for the papers, trying to tear them up. What do you think will happen if you tear them up? I asked calmly, stopping him in his tracks. Then I pulled out a voice recorder and my phone from my bag. I've recorded everything you just said, I told him. He snatched the recorder from my hand, but I didn't flinch. My phone is connected to a colleague, I lied smoothly. Even if you destroy the voice recorder, they've already heard everything, and if you don't sign, I'll help them file a complaint against you in the sales department. I stared at him. So what's it going to be? Sign the papers, or make it worse for yourself? Defeated, he nodded and filled out the divorce papers. I don't want any alimony or child support, just stay away from us, I told him firmly. Fine, he muttered. I grabbed the signed papers and left without looking back. Thanks, Mom, I said into my phone. It's okay, Just head to the city office and get it filed, she replied. I had been on the phone with her the whole time, letting her listen in case anything went wrong. Thankfully, Nico never figured out I was bluffing. Though I could have gotten help from my colleagues, I didn't want to involve him. As much as I hated Nico, he was someone I had once loved. I couldn't destroy his career, even after everything he'd done. But in the end, his actions made me realize my mercy had been wasted. After the divorce was finalized, rumors about me spread like wildfire. My ex-husband didn't waste a second, calling me a terrible wife, accusing me of harassment, and painting himself as the victim. He used every possible opportunity to tarnish my name, but I stayed silent. They say mothers are strong women, I reminded myself. For my child's sake, I refused to let his words bring me down. The only mistake I ever made was being blind to the kind of man he was. Unfortunately, sympathy for him grew in the sales department. One day, I was washing my cup in the office break room when I heard his voice behind me. "Hey," he said. I turned around, surprised. "What do you want?" "I came to see you," he said, grinning smugly. "Why?" I asked bluntly. "You're in trouble right now," he said, leaning against the counter. "What trouble?" "Everyone at the company thinks you're the bad one," he said, trying to sound intimidating. I shrugged. "Okay." His smirk faltered. He had expected me to be upset. "I've got work to do, bye," I said, turning to leave. But he stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "That's what happens when you piss me off," he sneered. "So, what exactly do you mean by that?" I asked, unfazed. His confidence wavered at my calm response. "You're getting a bad reputation in the company," he snapped, trying again. "And? Isn't that a problem for you?" "Not at all," I replied, smiling. His frustration grew. "If I wanted to, I could use my influence to ruin your career. If you don't like it, just apologize to me." I couldn't help but laugh. "Go ahead," I said. "Do you even know what my job is?" Only people in the development department could make my job harder, and guess what? I'm a patent attorney. You're a sales manager. Our roles don't overlap at all. You have no power here. "Oh, so you think you can get a patent just by talking to me?" My ex-husband sneered. "You'll never get it. If you're going to apply for a patent, don't bother doing it with me." Then, he suddenly grabbed my cup and swung it in the air, as if to hit me. I shut my eyes quickly, bracing for impact. "Enough," I heard a new voice shout. I opened my eyes to see the general sales manager and the general manager grabbing my ex-husband by the arms. I thought this was just a lover's quarrel, but I was wrong, the general manager said, looking surprised. My ex-husband stood frozen, staring at the managers. The general manager turned to me. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, still in shock. "Stop yelling. We could hear you all the way from the conference room," the general manager scolded my ex-husband. The managers escorted him out, and that was the last time I saw him at the company. He resigned voluntarily after that. It turned out, the conference room where the managers were holding their regular meeting was right next to the hot water supply room. The managers, including the general manager of sales and the deputy general manager from the legal department, could hear everything. My ex-husband, angry at my calm response, shouted insults, and everyone in the meeting overheard him. His lies about me being a moral harasser and a bad wife were exposed. The tables had turned. He went from making me the villain to being seen as the power-hungry, abusive husband. He couldn't handle it. In the end, the mercy I had shown him was destroyed by his own actions. As for what happened to him after that, I don't know. I'm just glad he's out of my life. The truth always comes out. Now, with my ex-husband gone, my stress is gone too. I'm focusing on working harder and becoming a mother my son can be proud of. As for my ex-husband, looking back, I think everything he did was pointless. But I'm just glad Mary is doing better.
Despite Scene's affair being exposed, he remains oddly content, speaking with a nonchalant air as if the car we're discussing is his by right. His surprising attitude leaves me baffled. Why is he so happy, and why does he act with such arrogance toward me? Sometimes it feels like we're living in completely different worlds. If I could just hand over this car to him, it would be a relief. The $2,000 monthly payment would be his responsibility, but I suppose he should be able to handle it. I wonder if he's really okay with that amount. Even though I don't agree with his suggestion, he smiles at me with a joy I've never seen before. My name is Holly, I'm 38, and I work in design. I thought I was managing my life well, but as I approach 40, the idea of marriage still lingers in my mind. I have neither a partner nor much experience in love. Seeing all my friends married, I sometimes felt left behind and considered giving up on the idea of marriage altogether. But seeing their happiness kept me dreaming. My life took an unexpected turn one day after work. Feeling uplifted, I decided to have a drink alone at a bar. I settled into a corner and ordered some snacks while scrolling on my phone. That's when a man approached me. "Any friends with you, miss?" he asked, peering at me with curiosity. This was my first encounter with Scene, who would later become my husband. "No, I'm here by myself," I replied. "Really? How about a drink together?" he suggested, taking a seat before I could respond. He started pouring himself a drink and, despite my protests, laughed it off, saying, "It's okay, just for a bit." Reluctantly, I agreed to this company, even though I wasn't in the mood to chat. Scene started talking away, and though I stayed silent, we eventually exchanged contact information and went our separate ways. I thought our meeting would be a one-time thing, but 2 months later, Scene and I began seeing each other more frequently. As we spent time together, I found myself increasingly drawn to him. His conversations brought me comfort, and when he said he missed me, it made me genuinely happy. Before I knew it, I was wrapped up in feelings I hadn't expected. 6 months after our first meeting, we became a couple, and 3 years later, we decided to get married. I had once thought marriage wasn't for me, so Scene's proposal felt like a dream. Looking back, it seemed like the pinnacle of my happiness. However, after we married, Scene changed completely. He seemed like a different person, making me question whether the man I dated was just an act. About a month into our marriage, Scene became distant, often coming home late. When I asked about dinner, his responses were always indifferent. "Whatever," he would say. Concerned, I asked if he was okay, but he would just brush me off, saying, "Leave me alone. It's none of your business." His behavior grew worse over time. He started coming home even later, citing overtime or drinking parties as excuses. I spent many nights alone, overwhelmed by loneliness. One evening, as I returned to an empty house after work, I received a text from Scene saying he'd be working late again. While I appreciated his message, the increase in his absences worried me. Had I done something wrong? Was he deliberately avoiding home because he was disillusioned? Scene eventually stopped coming home regularly. Our once slightly upscale apartment now felt like a lonely space. I found myself eating dinner alone and preparing meals for him, only for him to eat just a few bites before stopping. "What's wrong? Aren't you hungry?" I would ask, but his bad mood was a constant, leaving me to wonder how we ended up like this. I asked Scene about his recent change in attitude, and he responded bluntly, "To be honest, I don't find your cooking tasty at all." I was taken aback. Up until now, he'd always praised my cooking and even had seconds. On anniversaries, he preferred my homemade meals over dining out. So why this sudden shift? I apologized, saying, "Sorry, I didn't realize it was bad. I'll clean up right away." But he snapped, "Don't touch it," and continued eating, though he didn't seem to enjoy the meal, frowning the whole time. Since then, he started nitpicking about everything, from a coffee cup being out of place to a decorative picture slightly askew or a single strand of hair on the floor. I work too, so sometimes housework isn't perfect. I wonder if it's normal to be so fixated on trivial details. I've repeatedly told him that because of my job, housework might not always be flawless, but Scene won't listen. He always ends up shouting, "Just shut up and do as I say." The constant stress of dealing with his demands is building up, and I find myself questioning whether I should continue this marriage. The dissatisfaction with my imperfections and a swirl of emotions are making me consider divorce. However, the rarity of finding a partner at my age and the hassle of divorce proceedings make it hard to take action. I convinced myself that enduring is my role. Before we got married, I made a significant purchase, a luxury car from a renowned brand. It was bought on loan, as a lump sum payment was impossible. I'm not particularly obsessed with cars, but there was a specific model I'd always admired, and finally owning it made me incredibly happy. It motivated me to work hard, and I used it for commuting. Car enthusiast colleagues often chatted with me about it. Initially, Scene praised the car, saying it was a great purchase, but as his attitude changed, he began using it without asking. Even though Scene has his own car, he prefers mine, which is frustrating. Because of this, I've had to commute by train and walk for shopping. I tried to address the issue with him, saying, I really wish you'd stop using my car without asking. I need it to. Scene dismissed my concerns, responding, What's the big deal? It's fine if I use it. I replied, It's not fine with me. He retorted, I don't care about you. You're commuting by train now, so it's fine. Stop complaining. You have your own car, don't you? I prefer yours. Just let me use it without making such a fuss, Scene said, ending the conversation without listening to my concerns. The cost of train fares was quickly adding up, and walking from the station to home with a tired body was becoming increasingly difficult. My weekly shopping trips had turned into frequent errands as I struggled to carry heavy bags without the car. I even considered asking to use Scene's car, but he brushed off my request, saying, That's my car. You wouldn't know how to handle it. Don't joke around. I felt it was unreasonable for one person to need two cars, but I couldn't argue with him. With his personality, even the slightest deviation in the car's position or seat adjustments would likely set him off, adding another layer of hassle. If I were younger, I might have fought back more, but now, I didn't have the energy. Scene continued his pattern of staying out late. He claimed he wasn't drinking because he was driving, but sometimes I could detect an unfamiliar perfume. I began to suspect he might be cheating, especially with his increasing overtime and nights out. However, without concrete proof and lacking the funds for a private investigator, I chose to ignore these suspicions. Scene seemed to look down on me, probably thinking I was unaware of his infidelity. In his eyes, I must have appeared foolish and compliant, someone who would tolerate anything. The marriage I had envisioned was far from the reality I faced. I had dreamed of a warm, caring home where we supported each other and spent weekends exploring new places together. I had hoped that the life I envisioned with Scene might someday become a reality, but it wasn't turning out that way. As I sighed and prepared another solitary dinner, I wondered if this was how my life would be from now on. Then something happened that drastically changed my situation. On a day when I finished work earlier than expected, I decided to head home without calling Scene. He usually wouldn't come home that night anyway. As I approached our house with a heavy heart, I noticed something strange. My car was parked in the driveway. It should have been Scene's car since he had been using mine. Curiosity got the better of me, so I approached the car and saw it slightly shaking. I should have gone inside, but instead, I moved closer and overheard Scene's voice along with a woman's voice from inside the car. I listened in, trying to make out their conversation. Scene asked, Emma, do you love me? To which the woman replied, Of course I do. Her name was Emma. The conversation I had feared hearing was unfolding right before me. Scene said, I want to divorce quickly and marry you. Emma responded, Really? I'm so happy. How have things been with your wife lately? Scene replied, We barely talk. I don't even feel like talking to her. Why did I marry such a woman? I'm always with you, so I can't have a proper conversation with my wife. Emma laughed, adding, That's true. Feeling utterly humiliated, my heart ached with unbearable pain. I didn't want to hear more, so I quietly stood up and began to head home. But as I moved, my bag made a noise and Scene, noticing me, called out, Hey, you! Why are you here? I stammered, Oh, I was just coming home early. Scene's expression darkened and Emma's irritation was palpable as she said, You were eavesdropping. That's the worst. Scene got out of the car and confronted me. You said you were working late today, right? Why are you home so early? When you say you're working late, you usually come back much later. Were you trying to deceive me? I wasn't trying to deceive you, I protested. I really was working late. Besides, you're the one who's been sneaking around while I've been honest about my work schedule. I retorted, expecting Scene to be rattled by my accusations. However, with Emma sitting beside him, he seemed to have given up any pretense. So what's the problem? He asked defiantly. There's a big problem, I said. We're legally married, and what you're doing is clear infidelity. To think you brought another woman into my car. Scene shrugged dismissively. So what? I'm using it now. This car is ours from now on. I was so taken aback that I couldn't respond. His blatant disregard and brazen attitude left me speechless. It was as if he was daring me to argue further. If he wanted the car, fine. Let him have it. I thought, if they want the car, they can take over the loan payments too. The loan is $2,000 a month. I hope he can manage that. In reality, I was paying $22,000 a month on the loan, which was a stretch but manageable with my income. It seemed absurd to keep paying for a car that Scene now claimed. I'll give you the car, I said, but you'll have to take over the loan payments. Seen's response was immediate. Why should I? You should keep paying. Can't you afford it? I deliberately provoked him, and his anger flared. Fine, I'll pay, he snapped, caught off guard by the amount I mentioned. A few days later, I transferred both the car and the loan to Seen. When he received the documents detailing the loan amount, he didn't seem surprised. Whether he truly realized the burden of the $2,000 monthly payments or simply hadn't checked was unclear, but he seemed eager to finalize the transfer and move on. With the car issue resolved, we proceeded with filing for divorce. I hired a lawyer, anticipating that Seen's infidelity would be a major factor. The lawyer took on the case with enthusiasm, and after several weeks of preparation, the day of the confrontation arrived. Seen was clearly furious, and Emma stood by his side, displaying an arrogant demeanor. I was advised multiple times that hiring a lawyer was excessive, but I knew it was necessary. As the case progressed, it became evident how Seen and Emma had met and what kind of person she was. Emma was the daughter of an executive at Seen's company and also worked there herself. Seen was aware of her background when they started their affair. Although Seen was clearly at fault for pursuing her, Emma was also complicit for engaging with a married man. I demanded a divorce, sought property division, and asked for compensation from Emma for the emotional distress she caused. Seen, seemingly desperate, offered to settle any demands I had, saying, "Property division, divorce, do whatever you want. How much is it? I'll pay if that's what you want." Emma, on the other hand, was adamant about not paying compensation. "Why should I pay? It was Seen who approached me first," she argued. "But you knew he was married when you got involved with him. I have suffered mental distress because of your actions. You can't avoid payment," I countered. Emma stubbornly refused, saying, "Absolutely not. What if this gets out to your parents or workplace?" I replied, "I could send evidence by mail if necessary." Emma dismissed my threat. "Evidence? Do whatever you like," she said, seemingly unconcerned. But I wasn't merely making empty threats. If she'd insisted she didn't care, I wouldn't hesitate to act. Since Seen and I were already finalizing the divorce, we completed the proceedings that day. Seen agreed to the property division, and we settled everything and went our separate ways. As promised, I sent the evidence to Emma's workplace. Apparently, Emma didn't believe I would actually follow through. I was later informed by my lawyer that she ended up having to pay compensation as well. After the divorce, I moved to a house closer to my company and relished the freedom from both personal turmoil and car loans. It was incredibly liberating not to worry about others' actions. Sometimes I wonder if my life would have been smoother had I not married Seen. There's a tinge of regret, but my colleagues at work often comment on how much more relaxed and content I look now. From now on, I plan to live quietly, focusing on my own well-being and financial independence. No more marriage for me. I have decided to live my life solely for myself. But about 3 months after the divorce, I was caught off guard when I suddenly received a call from Seen. Curious about the reason, I answered the phone. "Hello." "Hey, what's this all about?" Seen's voice was tense. "What's with this red envelope?" "A red envelope?" I wondered if it was some kind of demand notice. "Calm down and tell me what's wrong." Seen, clearly agitated, continued, "What's this red envelope about?" When I opened it, it was a demand for car loan payments. I was taken aback. "You've been paying $22,000 a month?" Seen replied, "I had no idea. I thought it was $2,000 a month." "Didn't you know?" I said, "When we transferred the car's ownership and took out the loan, the amount was clear." "Maybe you didn't pay attention because I was managing the payments." Seen was frustrated. "I never imagined it would be $2,000 a month. Can't you continue making the payments now?" I responded, "Even if I continued making the payments, you'd end up using the car. We're divorced now. I'm not obligated to meet your demands. You insisted the car was yours in the first place. You can't just ask for payments now." Seen pleaded, "Don't be like that. We were married once. Even though we're divorced, we were in love, right? Help me out a little." I was incredulous. "In love? I've struggled for your sake all this time while you've lived as you please. Now you turn to your ex-wife for help. That's convenient. If you received a payment notice, you better get the money ready and settle it yourself." Seen lamented, "But I can't come up with that kind of money." I said firmly, "You're the one who promised to pay off the car loan. You need to take responsibility for your own words." Seen's anger was evident over the phone. but I had nothing more to say. I ended the call and refused to answer his subsequent calls. After ignoring him for a while, it seemed he eventually gave up as no more calls came through. 6 months later, I was still enjoying a comfortable life on my own. Moving closer to my office had made commuting easier, and I had more personal time to myself. I had taken up visiting art galleries as a new hobby and was enjoying my weekends exploring new exhibitions. One day, while I was relaxing, my smartphone rang with Scene's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated but eventually answered, wondering what he wanted. His once assertive tone was replaced by a weak, faltering voice. "Holly, it's me, Scene," he said. I responded coolly, "What do you want?" Scene's voice was barely audible as he admitted, "I can't make the payments anymore. Can you help me?" Surprised but curious, I asked, "Help you with what?" Scene started revealing details he had kept hidden. After our divorce, he had lost his job. The scandal of his affair with Emma, the daughter of a company board member, had led to his forced resignation. Emma had abandoned him, and despite his efforts to find new employment, he struggled with temporary and part-time work. Eventually, he sold both his cars, moved out of his rental, and returned to his parents' home. Scene had hoped that living with his parents would stabilize his life, but then his mother fell ill and required care. With his father aging, Scene had to juggle work and caregiving responsibilities. The car loans he had left behind still loomed over him, adding to his financial woes. "Please help me. How about we get back together? It would be easier for you too," Scene pleaded. "Easier for me?" I responded sharply. "If I got back with you, I'd end up shouldering the car loan payments and all other living expenses. Everything would fall on me, and it would be even harder than before. I've said it before, you're incredibly selfish, thinking I should reconcile so you can relax while I handle all the burdens." "That's not true," Scene protested. "Do you really think so? Do you understand the scale of the problems you've caused?" I asked. "You left your job and were abandoned by your girlfriend because of your affair. It's hard to care for your parents, but your situation is a result of your own actions." Scene was left speechless. I continued, "I don't understand why I married you in the first place. If I could meet my past self, I'd warn her against it. And now you expect me to agree to reconcile? I can't believe you're asking this after everything." Scene's pleas were desperate, but I remained firm. "I'll make sure you keep paying the loan. Take care of yourself. You can beg all you want, but I'm not agreeing to reconcile. Don't contact me again." "Wait, Holly, hey," he shouted as I hung up the phone. After that call, there were no more attempts from Scene to reach me, no emails, no texts, nothing. His urgency seemed to fade, and it felt like he was just trying to justify himself, portraying himself as the victim. 6 months had passed since our last contact, and I continued to enjoy my comfortable life alone. My new hobby of visiting art museums had become a cherished part of my routine, and my room was now filled with art catalogs and postcards. I even began thinking about visiting art museums abroad. Reflecting on married life, I've realized that even if given the chance to do it over, I wouldn't choose marriage. I'm simply grateful for the comfortable and fulfilling life I have on my own.
My name is Rose Watson, and I've been married for a decade, living separately from my mother-in-law who resides far away. Recently, I learned that she's retired and suffering from a debilitating backache, preventing her from working. Consequently, my husband has been diligently sending her money each month. "Hey, make sure to transfer this month's money to Mom, will you?" he asked. I assured him, "Sure, no problem. I won't forget." "Even if I forget everything else, thanks. That helps a lot. I appreciate it." My husband visits his mother at least once a month, assisting her with tasks she can no longer manage. However, on one occasion, he returned from her place agitated, suddenly accusing me. "What the hell have you done?" Perplexed by his sudden anger, I stared blankly as he continued accusing me. "All this time, I've been struggling to send her money, and you didn't care about my feelings. I told you to transfer $1,000 every month." "I did transfer it," I insisted. "I'm telling you it's not been transferred. Do you have any idea how hard it is to send that $1,000? I understand. I've had to take part-time jobs and scrounge for money just for that," he retorted. "Knowing all that, why didn't you send it?" "I did send it." "Why are you saying this?" "Just calm down a bit," I urged. How can I be calm when mom is struggling because she doesn't get the money from me and has even started doing piecework? He exclaimed. But I definitely did send it. Are you saying my mom is lying? I questioned. Then there's no way my mom would lie to me. You can't just make an assumption and then get mad when it's not true. I don't even know why this is happening. I've been sending her the money you give me every month. Then why is she doing piecework? She's in pain, lifting heavy boxes. I don't know about that. I haven't seen it. You never go to my family home. I go every month, but you never come with me. You just don't care about my mom, he accused. That's not true. There's no need for me to go every month, and it's so far away. I don't want to waste my only day off, I defended. Waste your day off? It's visiting family. How can that be a waste? He argued. Well, that's your family. You wouldn't think twice about it, but you don't go to my family's house, do you? I responded. Of course not. You married into my family, but I didn't marry into yours. You shouldn't say things like that. It only causes trouble, he countered. You're the one causing trouble. I muttered to myself, wondering if he even realized what he was saying. Frustrated, I tried to escape to the kitchen, but he followed me, still angry. Huh. I'm not running away. I just want you to calm down. Maybe we should have a coffee and talk this through, I suggested. I don't need that. Give me back all the money I've been giving you to send to my mom, he demanded. Why are you saying that? I'm your wife of 10 years. I've never lied to you. You should just believe me when I say I've sent it, I pleaded. I bet you've been spending my money. What'd you buy? Where's the $1,000 going every month? He accused. If I had bought something, there'd be new things in the house, right? But there aren't. If it were clothes, there'd be new clothes, but there aren't. I haven't bought a single piece of jewelry since we got married. I don't understand why you're accusing me, I defended. Even so, you must be using it for something. Or maybe you're saving it for yourself, planning to leave me, he speculated. Why would you even think of divorce? We have kids, I questioned, bewildered by the sudden turn in our conversation. I would never entertain such thoughts. How am I supposed to know I can't trust someone who lies like you? Why won't you understand that I've been sending the money to your mom? Then why isn't it reaching her? I have no idea. Could you be sending it to the wrong place? No way. I have your mom's bank account number registered with a bank. Unless she changes it, there's no way that could happen. Then the only thing I can think of is that you're stealing it. Stealing? Yeah, that's right. You're stealing my money, not sending it to my mom. That's it. I want a divorce. I can't be with a thief like you. Let's get divorced. It's clear you've been stealing the $1,000 meant for my mom every month. Hold on. Why does it have to come to this? What about our kids? I don't care about the kids. I don't need a wife who makes my mom suffer. No matter how much I tried to have a rational conversation, my husband just couldn't stay calm. And to say he didn't care about our kids, I've been desperately trying to make him believe me. But it's been hours of getting nowhere. Then there's nothing else to be done. After 10 years together, thinking this, I quietly responded to his demand for divorce. All right, divorce it is. Kicked out by my husband, I left the house with our child. Make sure you file the divorce papers. Conveniently, he had already prepared the divorce papers, as if he knew this would happen. I never thought I'd have to sign something like this, but now there was no other choice. I left the house, went straight to the office to file the papers, and decided to stay at my parents' house for now. My child was shocked by the sudden turn of events, but all I could do was reassure them with empty words. It's going to be okay. Then, after settling down in a new place with my child, I got a call from my ex-husband, Mark. Something weird is happening. Out of the blue, Mark started talking as if we were still married. What do you want with me, a stranger? Now, I know we're strangers. You call me suddenly. Don't even ask about your child, and say something weird is happening. You sound much weirder, you know. Well, here's the thing. I've been sending the money to my mom myself, but she says it's not being transferred. Maybe you're not transferring it. That's impossible. I did it myself. I don't know about that. Maybe you're doing it unconsciously, or perhaps you only dreamed you did it. Don't compare me with you. Then don't call me. I'm not free to deal with this. You're working as usual. So, you're free. How much more will he belittle me? He must think I'm just sitting around doing nothing. My bank statement shows I sent the money. The money's been withdrawn, but my mom says she didn't receive it. What do you think that means? Maybe you sent it to the wrong person. Then where did I send it? I don't know. Maybe you're giving it to some other woman. That's ridiculous to me. It's ridiculous to even have this conversation, but Mark doesn't seem to think so. Anyway, I have nothing to do with it. Wait, that's too cold. You can't just cut ties so easily. I'm not cold. The moment you decided on divorce, you were out of my life. How can you cut ties so easily? A woman doesn't look back. What's the use of dwelling on the past? On you, it's a waste. I'm in trouble here, not my problem. Can't you at least listen to me? How utterly self-centered. All right then, start from the beginning. Tell me what's happening and what's going on. Well, it was the day I said I wanted a divorce, remember? I went to check on Mom at her house, right? I asked her why she was doing piecework, even though I send her $1,000 every month. She said she hadn't received any transfers, so she had to do piecework to get by. Now I get it. That's why you were so angry, and you thought I was pocketing the money. Yeah, that's right. But even when you transferred it yourself, it didn't get there. Yeah, that's what's happening. So doesn't that mean it wasn't me? Well, I don't know about that. When you were in charge, maybe you were pocketing the money. That's awful. If that's what you think, then I'll go to your family's house myself. What are you going to do there? Maybe I'll find out something if I go. Yeah, maybe. So we ended up going to my husband's family house together for the first time in a while. When we got there, his sister was there. Oh, why are you here, Selena? I came back because I'm worried about Mom. What about your husband? We're divorced, just like Mark. Oh, so you divorced and came back to your family home? Yes, I did. When did you come back? 6 months ago. 6 months? Never mind that. Mom, is it true that you didn't receive the money I sent? It's true. It doesn't change the fact that the money wasn't received, whether both of you are here or not. But did you print out your account record in your bank book lately? Yes, I did. Just 2 days ago. Can I see the bank book? Sure, you can't show that. Why would you show a bank book to someone else? You're a stranger now. Why would you think she'd show you something so important? Are you out of your mind? But we can't know if the money really wasn't deposited unless we check. You don't need to see it. Then I'll look. I'm her son. It shouldn't matter. Fine, look. There's hardly anything in there anyway. My mother-in-law said this and then fetched the bank book from a drawer in the next room. But when we looked at the bank book, there were deposits and withdrawals. Look, Mark, there's a deposit from you here, and it was withdrawn the next day. That's quite punctual. Before this, even if you deposited it, it wasn't withdrawn immediately. I couldn't go to the bank much because of my back pain. I would wait until it was absolutely necessary, but since Selena came back, she's been going to the bank for me, which has been a big help. Ever since Selena returned, she's been the one going to the bank. The money was always withdrawn the next day, according to the bank book. Mark and I instinctively looked at her. What? I don't know anything about this, she said desperately. But from what we see here, it looks like you withdrew it, Selena. Mom doesn't go to the bank, and maybe someone else has Mom's card and is withdrawing the money every month. I don't have a card. I'm afraid of losing it, so I never made one, she replied anxiously. Tell the truth, Selena, Mark urged. All right, it was me. Mom told me to withdraw the $1,000 she was getting each month. I saw it was being deposited every month, so I thought borrowing a little bit would be okay. If you're borrowing it, are you planning to pay it back? I interjected. I intend to pay it back. I just don't have the money for it right now, she confessed. Why would you do such a thing? Mark questioned. I really needed the money. I only borrowed it because I had to. Besides, Mom's managing to get by. Isn't that fine? Selena justified. Were you that desperate for money? His mother softened her tone and asked. Then Selena completely changed her tone from her previous assertiveness, now playing the role of a pitiful victim. If that's the case, it can't be helped. Mark was kind enough to send the money. But this is an unavoidable situation. Yeah, if sister was in trouble, it's the family's job to help after all, Mark reasoned. Despite his rage and accusations towards me, Mark forgave his sister as if nothing had happened. Hey, I was called a thief over this, and now you're just going to let it go because it's your sister. It can't be helped. She said she's in trouble. That's fine for your money, but don't you have something to say to me? I challenged. Not really. No, not even an apology after all the horrible things you said to me. Why should I apologize? I don't see any need to. I was hurt by what you said, Mark defended. Such a fragile mental state, I muttered to myself. Anyway, it's not like I did anything wrong, right? Selena was having a hard time, so this happened. It's not Mark's fault. He doesn't need to apologize, his mother supported. Isn't this just like being completely surrounded by enemies? Even if I speak the truth, this place is hostile territory. There's no doubt that anything I say will be met with opposition. Even though a quick look at the bank book would have clarified everything, I had to travel all this way just to be treated like this. Fine, if cutting ties with you costs me this much, it's a small price to pay. I'm leaving. Drive me to the station, I demanded. Why do I have to take you? We're divorced, remember? I don't have to do anything for you, a stranger, Mark retorted. Because I came all this way for you. You asked me for help, I argued. Did I? I don't remember asking you to come. I just wanted some advice. You came here on your own. You can leave on your own too. Mark snapped. That's right. You're not a couple anymore. Why should he take you? It makes sense for a husband, but not for a stranger, his mother added. What a group. No thank you or sorry for solving the issue. After spending 10 years with such a man, it felt like such a waste of time. Fine, I'll take a taxi. I don't need you, I declared, frustrated. I called the taxi and somehow managed to get home. As I arrived home, tears of frustration streamed down my face, and I swore never to listen to that man again. However, after a while, my husband called me. Maybe he had changed his mind and was about to apologize for what happened. Perhaps he'd explain that he had to act that way in front of his sister and mother. But my expectations were shattered. Can you lend me some money? He asked abruptly. Shouldn't you say something to me first? Oh, long time no see, I replied. That's not what I mean. You're being troublesome, you know. It's not normal to ask for money without even apologizing first. That's not true. We were a married couple after all. You could say we were a united fate. That's not the case anymore. The day we split up, our united fate dissolved. I still think we're a united fate, though. He keeps saying whatever he wants. So lend me some money, will you? Why? The truth is, I found out Selena has a huge debt. Wait, it's been quite a while since that day. Didn't you ask her what she spent the money on? I couldn't ask her that. It would have been too pitiful. Money is a delicate subject. Maybe her ex-husband had something to do with it. Or there might be some other reason. Sure, there must be some reason. But you should have asked about it for the future, right? I trusted her because we're family, and yet there was no trust for me at all. Well, I've known Selena way longer than I've known you. Yeah, since we were born. That's why I trusted her. I thought everything would be fine, but in the end, it wasn't fine. So what happened? It turns out she had a huge debt, and the $1,000 a month wasn't enough. How much does she need then? She wants to repay it all at once. It's true that paying it off in one go would save on interest, but I don't have that kind of savings. So why did you contact me? Because you said you had a good amount of savings when we were in the car going to your parents' house. I remember. I was insulted by him, saying I must be struggling without money since our divorce, and that I would have stolen the money if he continued to ask me to make the transfers. Angered by his belittling words and the assumption that I couldn't survive on a part-time job, I ended up revealing that I was trading stocks and making a good profit. But would that lead to an ex-wife being asked for a loan? Selena says she's in debt for $30 million. $30 million? Yes, so please lend me the money. It's okay, right? First, why does she have such a huge debt? I was curious too, so I asked her. It turns out most of it was from shopping, and it's all brand items. She just can't control her desire when she sees them and ends up buying things. She put everything on revolving credit, so the interest adds up, and she keeps buying more every month. Before she knew it, her debt reached $30 million. She's really careless. Mark, laughing off his carelessness, is quite careless himself. She didn't understand how revolving credit works. She thought she could just pay a set amount each month, and eventually it would be paid off. I guess I can understand that feeling. I can't understand it at all. How could she take such a risk? And wasn't this the reason for her divorce? Now she finally realized the interest is piling up, and it's becoming a serious problem, so she came crying to me, but I don't have that kind of money. I told her I couldn't give more than $1,000 a month. Then she suggested borrowing from you. What? Why me? You said we were strangers, and you didn't even need to drive me to the station. That's all in the past. The past should be washed away like water under the bridge. What a selfish and convenient way of thinking. Would anyone accept that? So you could afford to lend it, right? Well, yes. I do have that much in savings. Then lend it to me. I just made a lot of money with stocks recently, so you win some, you lose some with stocks, right? Yeah, that makes sense. But didn't you say stocks were like gambling? Isn't it gambling? You always ridiculed me for playing the stock market, calling it a gamble. Right, did I? When you wanted a divorce, you hurried to separate because you said having a wife who gambles on stocks would lead to trouble. I said that when I didn't know how much you had saved. So that's why you asked me how much I had. That time you ridiculed me, but then I mentioned I had savings. Well, yeah, I didn't expect you to have that much, but I'm glad. I inquired, but even at that stage, you still dismissed it as gambling. Well, yeah, but let's not worry about it. I was foolish. All right, that's not all right. You are really cruel, and now you want money I saved for our child. You're worrying too much. Our child won't need that money for a long time. It's silly to start saving from now. Money rots if you don't use it. Money rots. I've never heard of money rotting. Think of this as an investment. It's like investing in me. Why would I invest in you? Just do it. Lending me the money would be the smartest move, right? Look, if I lend you money, it won't come back, right? You're still sending $1,000 a month to your mom. Where will you find the money to pay me back? All right, I'll pay back $11,000 a month. Are you crazy? How many years do you think it will take to repay it that way? Don't say that. I really regret it. Regret? Yeah, if we hadn't split up, I wouldn't have to beg you for money now. I have to ask, isn't that unjust? So you're just after my money? No, it's not like that. We don't have love, but we can rely on each other. It feels like I'm only being relied upon. You're so rigid. Thinking like that won't make you happy. We could even remarry. I didn't mind our marriage that much. Wow, I do mind. I don't want to be with someone who can't apologize. Fine, I apologize. Sorry. Is that good enough? What are you apologizing for? Explain in 400 characters or less what you did wrong. Ah, I just apologized because you said so. Pathetic. Don't ever call me again. Why? I apologized? So will you remarry me or help me? My sister is suffering. Shut up. Go to hell. Saying so, I forcefully ended the call and blocked his number. Later, I heard from mutual friends that Mark, despite saying it was impossible, couldn't refuse Selena. Being not only constantly nagged by Selena, but also persuaded by his mother to help. Consequently, he ended up borrowing money from a consumer finance company to repay her debt in full. Everything was settled, assuming Selena would work and gradually repay the debt. They thought so. However, Far from working, she resumed her shopping habits. Despite having suffered before, she again made purchases on revolving credit. This burden eventually fell directly upon Mark to handle. When they confronted her about why things turned out this way, she reportedly said, "I never intended to buy anything. By the time I realized it, I had already processed the credit." Mark and his mother, naively believing Selena's words, just accepted it, saying she must be sick. They neither devised any solutions nor took her to a hospital, despite thinking she is ill. While saying this, Selena, wearing expensive clothes and jewelry, is reportedly laughing over tea with friends, saying, "Really, Mark is so easy to manipulate." Eventually, they couldn't escape the debt and had to sell their family home. Now Mark, his mother, and Selena ended up living together, but they couldn't afford the rent for the apartment they used to live in. So the three of them moved. Apparently, their life is quite difficult now. It seems only Selena is enjoying it, but neither Mark nor his mother realized this. On the other hand, I continue to profit from the stock market and now live a comfortable life in a spacious apartment with my child.
The black dress feels wrong against my skin as I stand before my 7-year-old son's casket. Wrong because Nathan should be here, holding my hand, sharing this unbearable weight. Wrong because parents shouldn't outlive their children. And wrong, so profoundly wrong, because while I bury our son, my husband is in Hawaii with his mistress. I know this because a photo landed on my phone 10 minutes ago. Nathan, tan and grinning, a cocktail in hand, his arm draped around a blonde who can't be older than 30. Below it, the message read, "Thought you should see what your husband's really doing today. A concerned friend." My mother's hand tightens around my arm. "Gabrielle, you're shaking." She's right. The phone trembles in my grip until I shove it into my purse, its weight pressing against me like the judgmental eyes of the mourners around us. Whispers ripple through the small chapel. Secrets spread fast in our town, and Nathan's glaring absence at his own son's funeral will fuel gossip for months. "I'll kill him," my mother mutters, her voice low and trembling with fury. "That bastard, I'll kill him with my bare hands." The small, white coffin gleams under the chapel lights, draped in a blanket of roses, Lucas's favorite. He loved how food coloring could transform their pale petals into vivid blues and purples. We spent hours in the hospital together, conducting experiments just to see him smile through the pain. Nathan's parents linger near the edge of the crowd, their expressions carefully neutral. Linda, my mother-in-law, meets my gaze briefly before turning away. She knows. She's probably always known. The funeral director approaches, clipboard in hand. "Are we ready to begin?" I want to scream that I'm not ready, that none of this is right. Lucas should be home playing video games, begging for 5 more minutes before bedtime. Instead, I nod and take my place in the front pew. My phone buzzes again. This time, it's a message from Nathan himself. "Sorry I couldn't make it. Important business meeting. We'll make it up to you." A wave of rage washes over me, scorching away my grief for one fleeting moment and leaving behind something colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. I delete the message and sit up straighter. Let him enjoy his Hawaiian paradise with his cheap mistress. Let him think he's won, that I'll crumble under the weight of my grief like a dutiful, broken widow. He's wrong. I'm going to destroy him, not just for abandoning Lucas during his illness, not just for missing his funeral, but for every lie, every betrayal, every selfish moment when he put himself first. Piece by piece, I'll take everything from him until he understands what true loss feels like. The reception at my parents' house feels like a staged play, everyone performing their assigned roles. In the kitchen, Linda corners me, her manicured nails digging into my arm just a little too hard. "Nathan's going through a difficult time," she says, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "We all process grief differently." I shake her off, focusing instead on arranging cookies that no one will eat onto a serving tray. "Is that what we're calling it now? Processing grief in Hawaii?" Her lips press into a thin line. "You've always had a flair for dramatics, Gabrielle. Perhaps if you'd been more understanding during Lucas's illness." "Don't you dare." My mother's voice slices through the room, sharp and unyielding. She steps into the doorway, and I've never seen her look so furious. Don't you dare blame my daughter for your son's cowardice. Linda stiffens, her composure slipping for the briefest moment. Margaret, this is hardly the time. It's exactly the time. My mother closes the distance between them, her smaller frame somehow towering over Linda's. While my daughter was sleeping in hospital chairs for months, where was Nathan? While my grandson fought for his life, where were you and Robert, with your family support? The sound of shattering porcelain interrupts her tirade. I've crushed a cookie in my fist, crumbs scattering across the counter. In the living room, my father asks a guest about his newspaper for the third time in 10 minutes, oblivious to the storm brewing in the kitchen. We contributed financially, Linda says stiffly, her voice laced with condescension, which is more than I can say for some people. My mother laughs, a cold, bitter sound. Oh yes, your precious money. Tell me, Linda, does Nathan know about the trust fund yet? The one Robert's father left specifically for his great-grandchildren? Linda's face goes pale. This is the first I'm hearing of any trust fund, but it's clear from her reaction that this information wasn't meant for me. That's a family matter, she hisses. Lucas was family, I say quietly, the pieces falling into place. He was the only great-grandchild, that money was his. The tension in the kitchen becomes suffocating as Linda's perfectly composed mask begins to crack, revealing something dark and calculating beneath. All those times she discouraged Nathan from spending time with Lucas, all those business trips she conveniently arranged during his hospital stays, it wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate. I think you should leave, my mother says, her voice ice cold. But Linda's already retreating, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like tiny hammers driving nails into the foundation of my growing rage. I turn to my mother, my voice tight. Tell me everything about that trust fund. Her smile is grim, filled with years of quiet fury. Oh, sweetheart, that's just the beginning of what I have to tell you. 3 days after the funeral, I find the life insurance papers in Nathan's home office, not tucked away in a drawer or neatly filed, but scattered across his desk like discarded leaves, forms, receipts, and a post-it note scribbled with call summary policy in his hasty handwriting. My hands tremble as I sift through the papers. Then I see it, Lucas's life insurance policy, taken out 6 months after his diagnosis, $2 million. My breath catches as my eyes land on the beneficiary line, Nathan Thompson, sole recipient. My name has been crossed out. The change dated mere weeks before Lucas died. My phone buzzes, a text from an unknown number. We need to talk, coffee shop on Main, now. Samantha. The name hits like a slap. Sam, the woman in the Hawaii photo, the same Sam from the post-it note. I find her exactly where she said she'd be, looking polished and expensive in a way that reeks of someone else's money. She doesn't stand as I approach, only stirs her coffee with calculated precision. I'm surprised you came, she says without looking up. And I'm surprised you had the nerve to contact me. Now she looks up, her gaze hard. Nathan's been promising me things, big things, but now he's not returning my calls. What kind of things? I ask, though I'm not sure I want the answer. A fresh start, a new life together. Her laugh is bitter. Funded by your son's insurance money. The room tilts sideways, and I grip the edge of the table to steady myself. He told you about that? He tells me everything. She pulls out her phone and scrolls through messages, including how he made sure you'd never see a penny of it. His mother's idea. Apparently, she never thought you deserved their family money. Why are you telling me this? She leans forward, her voice sharp. Because he's playing both of us. That policy? He promised to split it with me, but I did some digging. He's got gambling debts. Gabrielle, big ones, the kind that make people desperate. My throat is dry. You're lying. Samantha slides her phone across the table. Text messages, bank statements, photos, a digital trail of betrayal spanning months. Nathan and Linda plotting, Nathan and Samantha planning, Nathan at casinos, with loan sharks, at places he had no business being while our son was dying. I'm not the villain here, Samantha says quietly. I'm just another mark in his con. But unlike you, I've got nothing left to lose. I stand, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're wrong about one thing. I have nothing left to lose either. Samantha smiles, all teeth. Then maybe we should help each other. I look at her, the woman who helped destroy my family, and realize she might be exactly what I need, a weapon aimed straight at Nathan's heart. Later, I find my father sitting in Lucas's room, holding a worn stuffed penguin. It went with Lucas to every hospital stay, his comfort through endless treatments. You look just like your mother when she's planning something dangerous, he says, his voice unusually clear. I sink onto the bed beside him, the mattress still indented from where Lucas spent his final weeks. Dad, do you remember what we talked about yesterday? He strokes the penguin's matted fur. No, but I remember Lucas telling me about the trust fund. His brow furrows. Was that real? My heart skips. What trust fund, Dad? The one Nathan's father wanted to discuss. Robert came here when Lucas was sick, said something about protecting family assets. His gaze drifts. Did I dream that? I take his hand, steadying my voice, despite the storm inside me. No, Dad, when exactly was this? Your mother was at the hospital with Lucas. Robert brought papers. His grip tightens, surprisingly strong. I didn't sign them. They felt wrong, like when you smell smoke but can't see the fire. The pieces click into place. Robert's unexpected visit, Linda's manipulations, Nathan's sudden interest in our family's property. It wasn't just about Lucas's insurance money. They were after everything. My phone buzzes again, a message from Samantha. Nathan's back, meeting with his lawyer tomorrow, something about property transfers. I should have protected you better, my father says, his voice cracking. Both of you. You did, Dad, I whisper, gripping his hand, by not signing those papers. I stand, my decision crystallizing, and now it's my turn. He holds out the penguin. Lucas knew. He told me not to worry about you because you're stronger than everyone thinks. His eyes cloud over. Who's Nathan? The familiar ache of watching him slip away mingles with a new, fiery determination. I take the penguin, its soft weight anchoring me to this moment. My phone buzzes again. This time, it's Uncle Peter. Found something in the property records. Come to my office, now. I kiss my father's forehead. I have to go, Dad, but I promise you, they won't take anything else from this family. Uncle Peter's office is a fortress of filing cabinets and legal documents, but what he shows me isn't buried in a drawer. It's on his computer, a series of property transfers dating back to when Lucas first got sick. They've been planning this for months, Peter says, scrolling through document after document, shell companies, hidden accounts, all leading back to Nathan and his parents. My fingers trace the dates on the screen. Each one aligns with a hospital stay, a chemotherapy session, a day when I was too consumed with saving Lucas to notice what Nathan was doing. Here's the kicker, Peter continues, pulling up another file. They used Lucas's medical bills to justify emergency sales of your joint assets. Everything's been quietly moved into accounts you can't access. A knock at the door startles us. It's Samantha, looking less polished than before. Sorry to interrupt, but Nathan's meeting got moved up. He's at the lawyer's office now. Peter glances at his watch. That's not possible. The meeting was scheduled for tomorrow. It was, Samantha says. Linda changed it. They're signing everything over today. Once it's done, she lets the sentence hang. My phone buzzes, a text from Nathan. We need to talk about the house, coming by later. The house, my parents' house, the place where my father still lives, the place where Lucas spent his final days, the property that's been in my family for generations. I square my shoulders. Show me everything. For the next hour, Peter and I sift through every document, every transfer, and every carefully constructed lie. Rage simmers beneath my calm exterior as we unravel Nathan's trail of gambling debts hidden behind corporate facades, Linda's systematic dismantling of our joint assets, and Robert's attempts to manipulate my father into signing away his rights. There's one more thing, Samantha says quietly, pulling out her phone. She presses play on a recording. Nathan's voice fills the room, discussing with Linda how they could use my father's condition to their advantage. The words echo like nails driven into a coffin, sealing away any lingering doubts. The recording ends, leaving only silence. In that silence, I hear Lucas's voice in my memory. Promise you won't let them take our home, Mom. We can stop them, Peter says, but we have to act now. I stand, gathering the documents we've printed. No, I'm not just going to stop them. I reach into my bag, pulling out Lucas's worn penguin and setting it on Peter's desk. I'm going to take everything back, and I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone else again. A faint smile curves Samantha's lips. I was hoping you'd say that. I know exactly where they've hidden the real estate contracts. Get your coat, I tell Peter, a fiery resolve building inside me. We're going to Nathan's lawyer's office, and this time, I'm not leaving without what's mine. The penguin watches silently as the three of us, unlikely allies forged by betrayal, step into the night. The lawyer's office feels cold, a calculated stage set for confrontation. Nathan sits across the polished conference table, flanked by Linda and Robert. Between us lies a thick stack of documents, a fortress of their deceit. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Nathan says, sliding the papers toward me. "Just sign, for Lucas." My hand clenches around the USB drive in my pocket, the drive containing every piece of evidence Peter and I painstakingly gathered, fraudulent documents, recorded conversations, and an irrefutable paper trail. "Don't you dare say his name," I bite out. Linda leans forward, her manicured nails tapping against the table in feigned sympathy. "Gabrielle, dear, you're clearly not thinking clearly. Grief can make people—" Her words are cut off by Samantha's sharp voice. "Show them." She strides in, followed by Peter, her phone already in hand. Nathan pales. What is she doing here? Connecting the USB to the lawyer's computer, I watch the projector flicker to life. One by one, the evidence scrolls across the screen: property transfers, falsified signatures, and recordings of Nathan and Linda plotting to exploit my father's dementia. "It's over," I say. Nathan's smile freezes me. Actually, he pulls out another folder, tossing it onto the table. The photographs inside make my stomach drop. Peter meeting with known criminals, bank statements showing questionable transfers, and emails hinting at tax fraud. "Imagine how damaging this would be for your family," Linda says softly, her tone venomous. "Your uncle's business destroyed, your mother implicated, your father uprooted from his home." Peter starts to protest, but Nathan cuts him off. "We can make this all go away, or we can destroy everything you have left. Your choice." The room spins as every carefully laid plan crumbles before me. They weren't just stealing, they'd built their own insurance policy against exposure. Nathan stands, his tone smug. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Choose wisely." They leave, their threats hanging heavy in the air. The projector continues cycling through the evidence, now a testament to a battle I'm no longer certain I can win. "They won't stop," Samantha whispers. "They'll take everything, piece by piece." I stare at the last image on the screen, Lucas in the hospital, smiling weakly. Nathan, as always, was nowhere to be found. "No," I say, my voice steady, "they won't take anything else, not from me. It's time we stop playing their game, we're changing the rules." That night, my mother's kitchen transforms into a war room. Documents cover every surface as Margaret, my mother, lays out her own secret cache of evidence, years of surveillance, bank statements, and recorded conversations. "I've been tracking Nathan's schemes since Lucas's first hospital stay," she explains. "I knew something wasn't right when he started pressuring your father about the property titles." Peter studies one of the documents, his face lighting up. "These transfers, they're legally binding, but they're not what Nathan thinks they are." A knock at the door makes us freeze. Samantha steps inside, her phone recording. "They're on their way." Linda convinced Nathan, "Tonight's the night to force your hand." "Perfect timing," my mother says, a dangerous gleam in her eyes. Peter pulls up more files, every property Nathan tried to steal, every asset he thought he owned, all legally transferred into a trust in Lucas's name. "How?" I whisper. "Your father had more clear days than they realized," Margaret says. "We made sure everything was properly signed and notarized during those moments. Nathan was too busy creating fake documents to notice the real ones." Headlights sweep across the windows, and car doors slam. "Remember," Peter says, his voice urgent, "let them think they're in control." When Nathan bursts in, his smile is triumphant, until Samantha presses play on her phone. The recordings play, Nathan and Linda confessing to fraud, discussing how to manipulate my father, and plotting every move. "You set us up," Nathan snarls, lunging forward. "No," I say, my voice cold. "You set yourself up. Every fake document, every fraudulent transfer, they've already been sent to the FBI." Linda reaches for her folder of threats, but my mother snatches it. "Looking for these?" she asks, her tone steel. "Funny thing about evidence, it works both ways." Nathan's face twists in rage. "You can't." "I already have." I cut him off. "The only question now is how far you want to take this, because I'm ready to lose everything to make sure you lose more." The silence that follows is deafening. The next morning, as frost crunches beneath my feet, I visit Lucas's grave. I set his penguin against the stone, its familiar weight grounding me. "You'd be proud, Lucas," I whisper. "We protected what mattered." My father joins me, more lucid than usual. Lucas told me not to worry about you. He said you'd find your strength. I smile softly. Did he? He nods, touching the penguin. Funny thing about strength, it sometimes looks like revenge, but it's really just love wearing armor. The weight of everything, the battles, the loss, the hard-won justice, settles on my shoulders. It isn't triumph, it's survival. As we turn to leave, a monarch butterfly flutters onto Lucas's headstone, its wings glowing like stained glass. Let it be, I tell my father as he reaches for it. The butterfly takes flight, free and unburdened, and for the first time, I understand what it means to let go. While I was watching TV, my husband stormed in, his face darkening with rage after my mother-in-law whispered something to him. Without warning, he shouted, "Why are you wasting time?" and smashed the TV, my father's treasured gift, on my head. Blood streamed down as I pleaded for help, but he showed no mercy. Dragging me by my hair, he hurled me out of the house, leaving me trembling in the cold. Shaking and desperate, I called my brother, Daniel. When he arrived, the nightmare only deepened. What followed was more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. My name is Harper Collins, and this is the story I never thought I'd live to tell, a journey through love, betrayal, and finding strength amidst unimaginable pain. 3 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be recounting this, I wouldn't have believed them. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? It all began when I met Jonathan Carter. At 26, I was living in Seattle, working as a graphic designer. My life was simple, steady, until Jonathan walked in. He was a 30-year-old banker, effortlessly charming and attentive, making me feel like the most important person in the world. Our whirlwind romance was filled with candlelit dinners, waterfront walks, and long conversations about our dreams. 6 months later, when he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. Friends called us the perfect couple, and I believed them, but perfection is often an illusion. After the wedding, we moved into a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood. It felt like a dream come true. I poured myself into building our life together, cooking Jonathan's favorite meals and making our home warm and inviting. He worked long hours, and though I missed him, I told myself it was for our future. The cracks began to show when his mother, Patricia, moved in a few months after the wedding. Officially, she was there to help out, but her presence quickly revealed itself as controlling. A retired schoolteacher in her late 50s, Patricia carried an air of authority. She criticized everything, how I managed the house, dressed, and even cooked. Despite my efforts to get along, nothing pleased her. Worse, Jonathan always sided with her. "Mom's just trying to help," he'd say dismissively. One night, after a long day of chores, I settled on the sofa to watch TV. It was a small comfort, reminding me of my late father. The TV had been his gift to me, and it brought a sense of peace. That evening, Jonathan came home late, looking tired but greeting me with a brief smile. For a moment, I hoped for a calm night. Then Patricia appeared, whispering something in his ear. His expression shifted instantly, his eyes cold and angry. "Get up," he barked. "Go to the kitchen and make me a fresh meal." Confused, I replied, "Dinner is ready. I kept it warm for you." "I don't want that," he snapped. "I want something fresh, now." Exhausted, I hesitated. "Jonathan, I've been on my feet all day. Can't you?" Before I could finish, he erupted. "How dare you talk back to me?" He crossed the room in a fury, grabbing the TV, my father's TV. He lifted it above his head and slammed it down. The corner struck me, and pain exploded through my skull. I crumpled to the floor, blood trickling as shock paralyzed me. "Maybe this will teach you to obey me," he growled. Patricia stood nearby, arms crossed, a smug look on her face. "You don't deserve to live here if you can't respect us," she sneered. Bleeding and trembling, I begged for help, but they were merciless. Jonathan dragged me to the door and shoved me outside into the cold night. With nowhere else to go, I called Daniel. When he answered, I broke down. "Daniel, please, I need help." "I'm coming," he said firmly. "Where are you?" When he arrived, his face was a mix of worry and fury. He helped me into his car and drove straight to the hospital. "We're going to fix this," he said, gripping the wheel tightly. "He's not getting away with this." As the doctor tended to my wounds, a flicker of hope emerged. I didn't have to endure this anymore. This was the beginning of a new chapter. one where I would fight for myself, no matter the cost. I hesitated, unsure where to begin, but I knew I had to tell Daniel everything. Taking a deep breath, I started from the beginning, recounting every instance of Patricia's interference, Jonathan's growing coldness, and my desperate attempts to please them, hoping things would improve. Finally, I described the horrifying moment when Jonathan smashed the TV on my head. Daniel listened intently, his fists clenched and jaw tight. By the time I finished, he was seething. "He's a monster," Daniel said, his voice low and full of rage. "And his mother is no better. Harper, you can't go back there, ever." "I know," I whispered, tears streaming down my face, "but what can I do? They've made it clear I don't belong there. I don't even have my belongings." "Forget your things," Daniel said firmly. "What matters is your safety. We'll figure the rest out. But first, we're going to make sure they pay for what they've done to you." I nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't alone. Daniel was my rock, and I knew he wouldn't let me face this battle on my own. Over the next few days, I stayed with Daniel, trying to recover both physically and emotionally. He helped me file for divorce, a daunting but liberating process. Cutting ties with Jonathan felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had lost. Yet, as freeing as it wasn't enough. Anger and humiliation burned inside me. I wanted justice. One evening, as I sat in Daniel's living room, I said, "I want to do more than just leave him. I want to expose him for what he really is." Daniel's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "What do you mean?" "I mean he's not the man he pretends to be," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "I've always had this feeling he's hiding something, the late hours, the unexplained phone calls. It doesn't add up." Daniel nodded slowly. "You might be right. If he's hiding something, we'll find it. Let's dig deeper." That's when we decided to hire a private investigator. Daniel found Jack Lewis, a seasoned professional with a reputation for uncovering the truth. When we met with Jack, I explained my suspicions about Jonathan's activities at the bank. Jack listened carefully, took detailed notes, and promised to begin investigating immediately. The waiting was agonizing. Every day, I wondered what Jack would uncover. Part of me worried I was overreacting, but another part, the part that had endured Jonathan's lies, knew there was something dark beneath the surface. 2 weeks later, Jack called. "I've found something," he said. "Can we meet in person?" My heart pounded as Daniel and I drove to Jack's office. When we arrived, Jack laid out the evidence he had gathered. The truth was worse than I had imagined. Jonathan wasn't just controlling, he was a criminal. He had been embezzling money from the bank, laundering it through fake accounts, and funneling it into offshore holdings. Jack presented documents, account statements, and surveillance photos. It was undeniable. I stared at the evidence, my mind reeling. "I knew he was hiding something," I said softly. "This is huge," Daniel said, his voice filled with determination. "We're taking this to the authorities." Jack nodded. "You should, but be careful. People like Jonathan don't react well when they're cornered." A chill ran down my spine, but I knew Jack was right. Jonathan was dangerous, and this was no longer just about me. His actions had hurt others, and I couldn't let him continue. The next day, Daniel and I went to the police with Jack's evidence. Detective Rebecca Hayes, the officer assigned to the case, listened carefully as we presented everything. "This is solid," she said, flipping through the files. "We'll start an investigation immediately." Leaving the station, I felt a mix of fear, relief, and empowerment. For so long, I had felt trapped, helpless. Now, I was fighting back, and for the first time in a long time, I believed I could win. The days after meeting Detective Hayes were a blur of nervous energy. The police took over the investigation, and I anxiously awaited updates. Jack's words echoed in my mind. "Jonathan is dangerous." I tried to stay busy, throwing myself into anything that could distract me. Daniel, as always, was my rock, offering constant support, but even his reassurances couldn't fully quell my fears. I knew that once Jonathan discovered the investigation, there would be no turning back. About a week later, Detective Hayes called us in. When we arrived, she gestured for us to sit. "We've made significant progress," she said, opening a folder on her desk. "Thanks to the evidence your investigator provided, we've confirmed Jonathan is involved in a large-scale money laundering operation. He's been embezzling funds for over 2 years, using shell companies to cover his tracks. The scope of his crimes is massive." Hearing it spelled out left me breathless. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice shaky. "We've built a strong case against him," Detective Hayes replied. We're monitoring his movements and preparing to make an arrest. But you need to be careful. Once he realizes the net is closing, he might try to contact you, or worse." I nodded, gripping the edge of my chair. "I won't let him get to me," I said, though deep down, I was terrified. As we left the station, Daniel turned to me. "You're handling this incredibly well, Harper." For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of pride. I was fighting back, and I wasn't going to stop until justice was served. The weight of everything settled on me as I sat in Daniel's living room, staring out the window. My thoughts drifted back to the beginning, when Jonathan had held my hand, promised me happiness, and made me believe in a future together. How could the same man who once vowed to love and protect me turn into someone who destroyed everything we had, smashed a TV over my head, and embezzled millions? The betrayal was unfathomable, but instead of breaking me, it steeled my resolve. He had taken enough. Now, he had to face the consequences. The days leading to Jonathan's arrest were tense. I couldn't stop imagining how he would react. Would he lash out or play innocent? A part of me dreaded the confrontation, but a stronger part, one I barely recognized, wanted to see him fall. When Detective Hayes called to inform me that Jonathan had been taken into custody, I felt a rush of emotions. "He didn't resist," she said, "but he's claiming innocence, saying it's all a misunderstanding." "Of course he is," I replied bitterly. It was so like Jonathan to paint himself as the victim. Still, knowing he was behind bars, even temporarily, gave me a sense of safety I hadn't felt in months. Preparing for the trial was grueling. Memories of Jonathan haunted me, his disdainful glares, the nights I cried myself to sleep, and the moment he threw me out, bleeding and broken. But those memories, as painful as they were, strengthened me. I was determined to stand up, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever felt powerless. The day of the trial came quickly. The courtroom, with its high ceilings and somber atmosphere, was intimidating. I sat next to Daniel, clutching his hand as Jonathan was brought in. He looked calm, even smug, as if he believed he could manipulate his way out of this. But as the prosecution laid out the evidence, documents, surveillance photos, and Jack's testimony, his composure faltered. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand on shaky legs, but spoke with a steady heart. I recounted everything, the abuse, the lies, and the night he smashed the TV over my head. My voice wavered at times, but I didn't stop. I refused to let him silence me again. Jonathan's defense tried to paint me as a bitter ex-wife, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. By the end of the trial, it was clear to everyone in the courtroom that he was guilty. The judge's verdict was swift. Jonathan was convicted on multiple counts of embezzlement, money laundering, and fraud. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. As the gavel struck, a wave of relief washed over me. Jonathan couldn't hurt me anymore. Walking out of the courthouse with Daniel, the sun shone brightly, but I still felt the weight of everything sinking in. "You did it, Harper," Daniel said, his voice full of pride. "You stood up to him." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Moving forward wasn't easy. The scars, both physical and emotional, remained, and there were nights when I woke up reliving his violence. But each day, I reminded myself of my strength. I had survived. Reclaiming my independence became a crucial part of my healing. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in downtown Seattle. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a space free from Jonathan's shadow. Work became another refuge. Pouring myself into design projects helped rebuild my confidence. My boss, always supportive, gave me opportunities to grow, and with each success, I proved to myself that I was capable. Through it all, Daniel remained by my side, my constant source of strength. Whether he was bringing groceries or simply sitting with me, his presence reminded me that I wasn't alone. One day, I came across a photo from my wedding. In it, Jonathan smiled at me, his arm wrapped around my waist. I stared at it, trying to reconcile the man in the photo with the monster he became. Finally, I tore it in half and threw it away. It felt symbolic, like I was finally letting go of the version of him I had once loved. Jonathan's sentencing sent shockwaves through the community. His crimes made headlines, and the bank issued a public apology for its oversight. Patricia, his mother, moved away, likely out of embarrassment. Part of me wanted to confront her, but I realized it wasn't worth my energy. My focus was better spent on myself and my future. One evening, Daniel and I went out to celebrate at a small Italian restaurant. As we clinked glasses, he raised a toast. "To your freedom." "To my freedom," I echoed, smiling, a genuine smile from a place of peace. Looking back now, I see how far I've come. What happened to me was horrific, but it didn't break me. It taught me that I deserve better, that I have a voice, and that no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way out. Jonathan underestimated me. He underestimated my strength. Now, as I look ahead, I know one thing for certain: I'm free to live, to dream, and to build a life on my own terms. That, to me, is the greatest victory of all.
I've always held a special place in my heart for my grandparents, a sentiment that dates back to my early years. Perhaps it was because my parents were frequently away due to work commitments that I found solace in the warm embrace of Grandma and Grandpa. My name is Hilda, and at 31 years old, I stand on the brink of motherhood, eagerly anticipating the arrival of my first child. In these final months of my pregnancy, excitement bubbles within me. Yet it's tempered by a nagging concern: my husband, Owen, who just turned 32. My worry stems from the subtle transformation I've observed in him. Lately, he's grown increasingly irritable, a phenomenon that coincides with what experts term digital caregiving. It was during an incident at my grandparents' house, where Owen was setting up their Wi-Fi, that his frustration reached a crescendo. Despite my grandparents' lack of need for Wi-Fi, we visited them occasionally. However, Owen's annoyance was palpable when he couldn't access his favorite paid movie site. He grumbled incessantly, even though my grandparents had personally funded the installation to accommodate his interests. His discontent seemed boundless, and he criticized every aspect of the installation process. My grandmother tried to correct his mispronunciations, pointing out that it was Google, not goggles, and Chrome, not columns. But her corrections only elicited a loud click of his tongue in response. I empathized with his frustration, but it left me with a sense of unease that defied explanation. Eventually, the installation was completed, but the atmosphere grew tense, far worse than the challenges of physical caregiving. It felt like a different, more insidious form of caregiving, one imposed by the digital world. I attempted to reason with Owen, suggesting that there were computer classes available for the elderly that he could learn from someone else. I even proposed hiring professional help if needed, but he dismissed my concerns with a sarcastic remark, expressing his fatigue and promptly left for his surfing hobby. This behavior was a departure from the man I married, a man who was once patient and kind. In the wake of his temperamental outbursts, Owen's attitude seeped into our home, leaving me feeling abandoned and helpless. I found myself seeking refuge at my grandparents' house, where I unwittingly vented my frustrations. My grandparents, wise in their years, offered a perspective that struck a chord with me. Perhaps, Grandma gently suggested, "Your husband feels like the impending arrival of the baby is pulling you away from him." The reason my love for my grandparents runs deep is their invaluable life experience, which they generously share as guidance. One evening during a visit, as I prepared to bid them farewell, my grandmother, in her thoughtful way, acknowledged the challenges of managing household chores while pregnant. She handed me a dish of homemade mac and cheese, a small but heartfelt gesture. However, when I served the same mac and cheese for dinner at home, my husband's complaints were swift and unrelenting. Ignoring his grumbles, I gently caressed my growing belly, now more susceptible to frequent kicks and agonizing back pain. My grandmother had prepared the meal with my condition in mind, but the issue went deeper. My husband's concern grew evident as he questioned my frequent visits to Grandma and Grandpa's, connecting it with my choice to bring back mac and cheese. I believe that serving the dish should be evidence enough of my love for him. But much like prenatal depression in expectant mothers, my grandmother suggested that something might be troubling him as well. He expressed his dissatisfaction with our dated dishes, comparing them to the cuisine of the 80s, before announcing his plan to go surfing. He dismissed the idea of eating the mac and cheese, seemingly convinced that the allure of modern pasta would outweigh his nostalgia. With a resigned sigh, I sat alone, wondering if the arrival of our baby might change his perspective, as my grandmother often emphasized the transformative power of a newborn. My hope was faint but persistent. I believed that our child's presence could lift the blues that had settled over us. The labor was grueling, 7 hours of intense pain followed by 3 more in the delivery room. It was a challenging initiation into motherhood, yet the sight of our baby's face made every hardship inconsequential. Despite being tiny, the baby resembled a miniature human down to their tiny fingers. I thought that perhaps my eternal blues and my husband's gloom could both dissipate in the face of this new life. Unfortunately, my husband never visited the hospital during my stay, nor did he make an effort to meet our newborn. Instead, when I returned home from the hospital, I was met with his continued absence. He questioned, his doubt evident in his eyes. "Is this really my child? You've often left home, claiming to visit your grandparents. I find it hard to believe." As I stood on the doorstep, holding our newborn, he coldly demanded, "Give me some of your hair. I need a DNA test to confirm if it's really your child." My heart raced with disbelief. Where did this come from? I thought. I had just endured the excruciating pain of childbirth. Was it fair for him to accuse me like this? Anger surged through me, an intensity I had never felt before. Was he really accusing me of infidelity? What infuriated me more was Owen's complete lack of joy in the presence of such an adorable baby. It felt like my very essence of motherhood was being negated. The next day, pushed beyond my limits, I poured out my grievances to my grandparents, who had come to check on the baby. My grandfather, perhaps trying to offer support from a male perspective, said, "If you haven't done anything wrong, why not take the DNA test? Women can hold their heads high if they are innocent, but sometimes men need evidence to believe. Sharing objective facts is important. If this clears the suspicion, ask him to make it up to you with a nice cake or something." His words did offer a measure of solace, so I decided to submit my hair for the DNA test. I hadn't done anything wrong, and if this resolved things amicably, so be it. I convinced myself of my innocence. However, a week later, Owen slammed a paper with the test results in front of me, his face triumphant. "The test result is here. It's not my child. What's the meaning of this?" he declared, pointing at the paper that confirmed the absence of any genetic match with him. I stared at the paper in utter shock. "This is evidence of adultery," he stated, his voice laced with accusation. I was dumbfounded, with no memory of such an event. Clutching the damning evidence, I went to my grandparents' house, where tears flowed freely in their comforting embrace. After a brief silence, my grandfather spoke gently. "Hilda, you used to come to our house when you were in trouble, didn't you? It's okay. Leave the rest to me." He patted my shoulder with his wrinkled yet reassuring hand and then tenderly stroked my hair. The baby's soft fontanelle, yet to close, felt delicate beneath my touch. From my childhood, my grandfather had always reassured me, saying, "It's okay," and he continued to do so today. Large, heavy tears spilled down my cheeks as I whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa." A few days later, my grandfather made a significant move. He called Owen, summoning us all to their home for a weekend discussion, a discussion inevitably leading toward divorce. Owen arrived, his arrogance evident as he looked down at me, deliberately placing the DNA test results he had shown me earlier onto a table. While my parents were aware of the impending discussion, only the 4 of us, my grandparents, Owen, and I, were present, per my grandfather's decision. "For now, leave it to me," he had said. As we gathered in the living room of my grandparents' house, my grandfather began the conversation. He distributed copies of the DNA test results, irrefutable proof that there was no blood relation between Owen and the baby. Everyone examined the paper, and my grandfather proudly stated, "This is from Adam's clinic, as written here. There's no denying it." Owen, clearly baffled, asked about the appraisal. "What appraisal?" he questioned, his confusion evident. With an ominous chuckle, my grandfather placed some similar-looking hair on top of a copy of the appraisal result that Owen had prepared. "This is a genuine document from Adams Hospital where the DNA test results are recorded," my grandfather explained. "I had a test done to check the relationship between Grandma and her daughter, In other words, between Hilda's mother and her. I blinked in confusion, struggling to comprehend the situation. Why? I stammered, trying to make sense of it all. Take a good look, Hilda, my grandfather grinned. Compare this DNA report with the one he brought. The format, the style of the document, completely different. Beads of sweat formed on Owen's forehead as my grandfather continued. He recounted how, feeling slighted by Owen's suggestion that I attend computer classes for the elderly, he had indeed attended one. There, he had met a doctor from Adams Hospital. The doctor's familiarity with an appraiser led to an unexpected turn of events. When I saw the appraisal result that Hilda brought, I wondered why it was done at Adams Hospital instead of the Harris Maternity Clinic, where Hilda gave birth, my grandfather explained. I assumed that if it was the maternity clinic, they would have conducted the test using Hilda's saliva. Truth is stranger than fiction. Up to this point, the grandfather's eyes had been filled with disbelief. When I asked the doctor at Adams Hospital, he continued, he confirmed that your granddaughter hadn't taken any tests here. After further discussions, he suggested that showing you our official document would expose the lie clearly. Owen began to tremble. This is forgery of private documents, the furious doctor at Adams Hospital had declared. You should prepare for serious repercussions. I'm sorry, Owen finally admitted, tears streaming down his face. It was reckless. I never thought I'd get caught. What do you mean, never thought? That makes it even more unforgivable, the grandfather reprimanded sharply. I have no intention of forgiving you. I want to make this a tale to take to the grave. Let me tell you how I uncovered the lie. The roles of detective and suspect reversed. Listening to Hilda's claim, the grandfather decided to investigate using the computer skills he had recently acquired. With practiced movements, he logged into the computer and performed a search. I did an image search for DNA test certificates, he said, emphasizing the words Google Chrome as his grandparents engaged in a light-hearted comedy routine. The very first image that came up was identical to the document my husband initially showed me. Owen, now sobbing, was handed a bundle of papers by the grandfather. Naturally, we're curious about the motive behind this forgery, the grandfather said, his tone stern. I hacked into your computer. Upon hearing about Owen's surprisingly technical skills, he reflexively raised his head in astonishment. Hacking. It wasn't just him who shouted, I did too. To be precise, I snooped into your computer, the one in your room. How did you know the password? It must be 4646 or 4633. Owen stammered in surprise. I heard it from a retired cop I met in a computer class, I said, explaining further. The surfers around this area mostly use 4646 or 4633 in their pins. Ah, Owen exclaimed in realization. It means going off. Exactly, I confirmed. The senior network at the computer class is something to be feared. So I tried inputting it on a whim, and lo and behold, I got access just like that. Grandpa continued, his excitement palpable. But cracking the password is impressive, but there's more. You know, when you look at the timeline on Google Maps, it shows all of your activity history. Sweat dripped from his chin onto the table. The ink on the fake DNA test report is smudging, so I investigated. And just so you know, this wasn't taught in class. I found this method by searching tirelessly to protect my precious grandchild. I searched for all the days when Hilda came to vent and the days you went surfing. I was shocked. All the destinations were shady motels. Here's the printed proof, Grandpa declared, slamming a stack of papers onto the table. But this alone won't. No, this is more than enough, don't you think? Ready to confess. Owen hesitated, but before he could respond, Grandpa ignored him and brought over a tablet. I borrowed all the data saved on your computer. Allowing messages to be viewed on the computer backfired on you. Flirting with this woman called Melly, I've transferred all that data onto this tablet. Grandpa opened the tablet screen, revealing a flood of evidence of Owen's infidelity, including messages like, Hotel Lagoon was nice, and I really want us to be a real couple soon. Winky face. Owen couldn't say a word anymore. It was you who told me to go to the computer class, wasn't it? Grandpa delivered the final blow, his voice firm with disappointment. How dare you neglect your heavily pregnant wife at such a delicate time? Realize the lowly act you have done as a man. You don't deserve to be the father of my adorable great-grandchild. You framed Hilda for cheating, hurt her, and used your own child as an excuse to frolic with your mistress. It's absolutely disgraceful. You deserve to be punished. Owen could only bow down in submission as Grandpa added insult to injury. I've copied the forged data from the DNA test report you made as evidence of your criminal activity, he said, rendering him completely incapacitated. Naturally, I ended up deciding to divorce him right after giving birth. But I received a hefty amount of compensation for his adultery, and of course, from his mistress as well. I made him pay child support in a lump sum. So financially, I've gotten a bit comfortable. I'm thinking of looking for a daycare for my child to attend soon. As the saying goes, when the money is gone, so is the relationship, and it was exactly the case with him and his mistress. I got inundated with crying emails from Owen saying, "I'm broke, and the woman has left me. Please take me back," but I promptly blocked him. More importantly, he's being sued by Adam's Clinic for forging private documents. There's no way I could reconcile with such a person. Meanwhile, my child has been lovingly welcomed by my grandparents. Recently, they've started to chuckle at the sound of the bell when hitting a stuffed roly-poly toy with their fist. Children grow up fast. Looks just like Grandma, doesn't she? She's going to be a beauty, Grandpa says. No way, she's going to be much more beautiful than me. Grandma laughs too. Let's take pictures and make a photo movie. A baby's face changes every day. Grandpa, in a good mood, heads to his beloved computer. Thank you, Grandpa, Grandma. I really love you both. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you resonated with the content, please leave a positive rating and a comment.
Out in the mountains, far from anyone, my mother-in-law glared at me. "Take care now," she said coldly before slamming the door of her fancy SUV. The sound echoed in the quiet night as gravel flew from the spinning tires. She drove off quickly, leaving me alone. Under the moonlight, I caught a glimpse of her face. For the first time, I saw her cruel smile and the glint of her eyes, sharp and dangerous like a predator. She looked at me like she'd already won. "Mom, why?" I whispered, my voice shaking, but she just leaned out the window and laughed. It was a chilling sound, full of triumph. "Goodbye, Emily," she sneered. "No one's coming to help you. By tomorrow, you'll just be food for the wolves." Her words cut through me like ice. The roar of her SUV's engine faded as the headlights disappeared into the dark, leaving me frozen in disbelief. I reached for my phone, desperate to call for help, but it wouldn't turn on. Then I remembered, earlier, she had borrowed my charger. She had planned all this. She tricked me into coming out here under the pretense of showing me a stargazing spot. I felt so foolish. Maybe if I had tried harder to get along with her, or if I had been more serious about handling things with my husband, this wouldn't have happened. But now, standing in the freezing night, I was alone, with only the distant howls of animals echoing in the distance. Fear crept through me. I could feel something watching from the shadows between the trees. The crunch of leaves and heavy footsteps came closer. My heart pounded as I backed away, unsure which direction was safe. Behind me, the sound of footsteps grew louder. "I'm Emily Matthews, 26 years old, married to John for 2 years. John has always been kind and supportive. When I was overwhelmed with work or unwell, he would cook for me or help me feel better. Marrying him was the best decision of my life. I come from a well-off family, but I worked hard to build a life of my own. I didn't want to rely on my parents' money, so I kept my family's wealth a secret from John. I wanted to live by my own efforts. John and I both worked in the bridal industry, and I loved my job. But then John decided to quit his stable job to start his own business. Though worried, I supported him because I believed in his determination. Then, I found out the truth. John had been in a relationship with another woman from his college days. Not only that, but he had racked up $50,000 in debt from extravagant trips with her. I had no idea and was devastated when I learned about it. To my horror, he started his business with that same woman as his partner. He claimed his family was supporting him financially. His mother, Susan, adored him and justified everything he did. She treated me as if I was trying to steal her son. Meanwhile, John's sister, Megan, lived off him completely. She refused to work, saying she didn't want to deal with things like speaking formally to her boss. She seemed entitled and difficult, which made dealing with her exhausting. For a while, I endured it all because I loved John, but Susan and Megan started visiting our home often, rummaging through my belongings without permission. They used my expensive, cherished items as props for their social media, treating them carelessly. One day, Susan took my favorite brown purse without asking and broke it. I hoped she'd apologize, but instead, she smirked and said, "It was bought with John's money, so I don't owe you anything." I felt crushed. Even though I earned a good income, I couldn't keep replacing my things endlessly. I reminded Susan that the bag she broke was something I bought before I got married. It was my first big purchase, something I had dreamed of owning. "Yeah, right," she scoffed. "Girls like you don't have money for things like that. Don't try to fool me." She had already labeled me as a gold digger, accusing me of spending John's money on luxuries. It was impossible to talk to her. She didn't even try to understand. She only saw me as an enemy. When I turned to John for support, he barely listened. "Just hold on a little longer. Mom's going through a rough time," he said. It hurt so much to feel ignored, even by him. I had always thought of myself as strong and independent, but being so alone was overwhelming. Around that time, John's business started to fail. He couldn't keep up with Susan and Megan's expensive lifestyles anymore. He finally told them he couldn't support them financially. They panicked, but instead of considering getting jobs, they came up with another plan. "Take some of Emily's money and give it to us. Family comes first," Susan declared. I explained, again, that I split living expenses with John and used my own income, but they didn't believe me. Their frustration grew, and for a while, they visited less often. I thought maybe they were starting to accept reality. I was wrong. They were plotting something far worse. When Susan found out about my wealthy family, her resentment deepened. She became obsessed, convinced that if I disappeared, they could control John's money and even inherit a fortune from me. She imagined millions, even though I hadn't written a will, and my family, not them, would inherit everything. Her twisted thinking led her to a horrifying plan. Susan knew I loved photography, especially taking pictures of the night sky. She researched remote locations with little human activity and found a spot where she thought no one would find me. "Out here, no one will ever find you. It's bear season, this'll look like an accident," she told Megan. Megan agreed without hesitation. "I'll drive for you, Mom. We're doing this for John," she said, pretending it was for his sake, though it was really all for their own benefit. On the day of the plan, Susan called me with an unusually friendly tone. "Emily, I know you love stargazing. There's a spot nearby with the most beautiful stars. Want to go?" she asked. Feeling hesitant but hopeful, I agreed. They seemed so kind that day, chatting about beauty and fashion, even complimenting my hair. "I've always wanted a daughter like you," Susan said warmly. It felt strange, but I wanted to believe they were finally accepting me. When we reached the spot, they encouraged me to step out and take pictures. "We'll grab some things from the car and join you," they said. I stepped out, looking up at the breathtaking stars, but then I heard the car door slam. I turned to see them locking the doors and starting the engine. "We'll be taking the house and car, watch out for bears." "Honey," Susan shouted as they sped off, leaving me alone in the cold, dark mountains. Fear gripped me as I realized I had been abandoned, but I wasn't entirely unprepared. I had a backup plan. Meanwhile, Susan and Megan were celebrating. "It's all taken care of," Susan said, grinning. They went out for a fancy dinner, thinking their troubles were over. But when they returned home, their celebration ended in shock. Police cars were waiting in the driveway. Standing beside them was me, calm and unharmed, alongside my father and several officers. "What? How are you here?" Susan stammered, frozen in disbelief. Megan tried to sneak away, but the police stopped her. I had been rescued thanks to my father's safety measures. Since I was young, he had insisted on tracking my location through GPS and having a backup emergency system. When I realized something was wrong, I activated it. My father, who had access to a private jet, reached me quickly. The clear stargazing spot made it easy for them to land and rescue me. I had also recorded the entire car ride, as my father had advised me to always record suspicious situations. "We'll be taking the house and car, watch out for bears." Susan's voice rang out clearly from my phone. The evidence was undeniable. Susan and Megan were arrested on the spot for attempted murder and fraud. Susan fainted, and Megan broke down in hysterics, blaming her mother. John, meanwhile, was exposed for being with his mistress all along. He testified against his family, but it was just another betrayal in a series of heartbreaks. The story became a media sensation. Headlines mocked Susan as the mother-in-law who wanted millions. Details about how Susan and Megan used my belongings for social media clout went viral. John, who had once prided himself on his reputation, now couldn't even leave the house without facing shame. As for Susan and Megan, their disgrace didn't end with their arrests. Someone leaked their phone numbers, and they were bombarded with calls from angry strangers. The next day, all of Susan and Megan's bank accounts were frozen, and everything they owned was seized. Without John's income, they couldn't afford anything. To make matters worse, news about John's mistress spread all over the internet, destroying his reputation completely. The man who had betrayed me had now lost everything, including his dignity. I found out John had been with his mistress since the beginning of our marriage. Remembering the kind things he once did for me now felt like a cruel joke. Why had he married me if he never truly loved me? My heart ached with pain and betrayal, but I resolved to move on. Susan and Megan were evicted from their luxurious apartment and moved into public housing. It didn't take long before their new location was leaked online. Susan became mentally unstable, constantly muttering about how her life was over. Megan, abandoned by her own family, tried to work part-time jobs, but struggled due to a lack of skills and work ethic. Megan even messaged me, asking for help getting a job like mine. Working at weddings and wearing nice clothes sounds fun, she said. I ignored her. The bridal industry wasn't something she could just jump into, and their downfall wasn't my responsibility. Meanwhile, Susan moved into a rundown apartment surrounded by graffiti and decay. As for me, I left the house I'd once shared with John, along with all my possessions, and returned to my parents' home. It felt safer, even though I still carried emotional scars. One day, John unexpectedly called me. Seeing his name on the screen made my stomach churn. Emily, I'm so sorry. I've cut ties with my mom. Please, let's try again, he said, but his promises felt hollow. How could I trust him again after everything? Maybe your mistress needs your protection more than I do, I replied coldly, ending the call. Susan wasn't done yet. Desperate and bitter, she hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. When the detective found nothing, Susan latched onto a small detail, my PTSD. She thought she could use it against me. One evening, as I walked alone, Susan suddenly appeared on the sidewalk. Her clothes were shabby, but her face wore a twisted grin. Guess the bears didn't get you, she sneered. Her words sent a wave of fear through me as memories of that night in the mountains flooded back. She even threatened to spread a video of me unless I paid her. Though her threat made no sense, her presence terrified me. She climbed into a car and drove away, leaving me shaken. I called my father, who was furious. Using his resources, he discovered evidence of tax evasion and fraud in John's business. When confronted, John had no choice but to admit his guilt. His mistress, Lena, was shocked to learn she was tied to his shady dealings. Their lies and schemes unraveled, leaving them exposed and humiliated. John's accounts were frozen, and he lost everything. Even his mother, Susan, abandoned him, saying, "You're no son of mine." Both of them were left with nothing, their selfishness leading to their complete downfall. Despite everything, I focused on healing and finding a new purpose. My experience inspired me to help others escape toxic families and rebuild their lives. With my parents' support, I opened a refuge center in the family retreat where I'd once been rescued. It became a safe haven for those who needed a fresh start. I even earned a counseling qualification to guide others through their pain. Over time, the refuge grew, welcoming people who needed a safe place to heal. One day, a woman arrived, escaping her abusive family. I reassured her, "You've done so well to get out. I'm glad I left when I did, too." Her tears turned to a soft smile as I reminded her it was okay to acknowledge the pain and set boundaries. With time, I began to smile again, finding joy in helping others rebuild their lives. Susan, Megan, and John continued to struggle, but I felt no pity. They were simply reaping the consequences of their own actions. Meanwhile, the refuge became a place of hope, ensuring no one else would have to face the kind of pain I once endured.
Hi, I'm Safia. a 29-year-old graphic designer who's been trying to navigate the complex world of marriage and family life for the past 3 years. Before I share my story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life tales full of unexpected twists. Now, let me take you through the heartaches that unfolded just before what was supposed to be a dream vacation. We had been eagerly anticipating this trip for months, a family getaway to Hawaii, the kind of paradise you only see in glossy travel magazines, promising breathtaking sunsets and soothing ocean waves. But as the morning light filtered into the room, it revealed a stark contrast to the silence that had settled over the house. Something was wrong. The usual pre-trip commotion, James and his parents bustling about, the clatter of breakfast dishes, was missing. Instead, there was only an eerie, unsettling stillness. I grabbed my phone, the time glaring back at me, and a wave of panic surged through my stomach. I had overslept. But where was everyone? I hurried downstairs, the stillness of the house growing heavier with each step. Then I saw it, a note casually left on the kitchen counter. Didn't want to wake you. You seem tired. We'll see you when we get back. My hands shook as I gripped the note. James's words echoed in my mind, an excuse wrapped in the guise of thoughtfulness. Confusion and hurt swirled within me as I dialed his number, each ring dragging on painfully until his voice finally answered. Hey, you're awake, James greeted me, his tone almost too casual. We thought it'd be best to let you rest. The flight was smooth and the weather here is amazing. You would have loved it. How could you leave without even waking me? We planned this trip together. James sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the ocean between us. Sophia, we just thought you needed the sleep. Mom suggested it might be best to let you rest. And that's when it all fell into place. The subtle comments, the coolness in his parents' demeanor, the whispered conversations they thought I couldn't hear. This wasn't just James's decision, it was a collective choice. They never truly intended for me to be part of their family, not really. I needed to be there with you, with all of you. This trip mattered to me too, James. It's not just about missing a vacation, it's about being shut out of our family's life. There was a pause, the kind that lingers just long enough to let you know that the words coming next won't fix anything. I'm sorry you feel that way, Sophia. We'll talk when I get back, okay? Just try to enjoy the time at home. I love you. The line went dead, and so did something between us. As I stood in the silence of what used to be our shared home, I felt a resolve solidify within me. This wasn't just a wake-up call, it was a turning point. The James I thought I knew would never have left me behind, but the harsh reality was that he did, and with disturbing ease. The stillness of the house now felt suffocating, heavy with revelations that seemed to seep from every corner. As I moved from room to room, each space seemed to echo with memories, some once sweet, now bitterly tainted by the clarity of hindsight. As I put the picture back in place, my phone buzzed. It was Melissa, my best friend, her name flashing on the screen like a beacon of support. Sophia, how are you holding up? I just heard about what happened. Her voice was a comforting thread of normalcy, but as we spoke, I found my eyes opening even wider. Melissa, it's like I've been in the dark all this time. All these little moments are making sense now. Like last Christmas, James and his parents, they were always subtly pushing me out, weren't they? There was a pause, thick with unspoken understanding. Sophia, I didn't want to say anything before, but yes, I noticed it too. I thought it was just family dynamics, nothing more. My voice, edged with anger and sadness, cut through. I think you've been too good for them from the start. What are you going to do now? I moved to the window, watching a couple across the street laughing together as they walked their dog, so normal, so united. Turning away, I felt the sharp sting of isolation. I'm not sure yet, Melissa, but being left behind, it's more than a slap in the face. It's a wake-up call. Maybe it's time I start making decisions for myself, decisions that don't involve James. Good for you, Sophia. You deserve happiness, not this endless questioning of your place. As the call ended, my resolve solidified. I grabbed my laptop and began typing, not just jotting down thoughts or keeping a diary, but creating a list. A list of every slight, every dismissive comment, every instance where James or his parents made me feel insignificant. Later, as the dusk bathed the sky in shades of fading hope, my sister Anna called. She had always been my confidant, and now, more than ever, I needed her fierce, protective spirit. Sophia, Mom told me what happened with James. Are you okay? Her voice carried a blend of concern and anger, reflecting the turmoil I felt inside. No, Anna, I'm not okay. But maybe that's a good thing. I'm finally seeing things clearly. I can't keep being the only one fighting to make this work. It feels like I've been competing for James's affection against his own family. Remember last Easter when you hosted dinner and Elaine insisted on redoing the table settings? It was like she needed to assert her control, even in your own home. Exactly. It's always been them first and me a distant second. I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. Whatever you choose to do, we're here for you. We all see you for who you are and love you. That night, I went to bed with a notebook by my side. The pages quickly filled with plans and ideas. No longer just dreams, but concrete steps to take. Tonight, I allowed myself to fully embrace the weight of my heartache, using it as the foundation for the strength I would need to rebuild. As the morning light filtered through the blinds, it cast long shadows across the room, where I sat amidst a sea of scattered papers and notes. Each document was a piece of the puzzle that was my marriage, emails, texts, and photos, laid out as evidence of the many ways I had been sidelined. My phone rested beside me, displaying the contact information for a recommended divorce attorney. It was time to move forward. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the number. The line clicked, and a calm, professional voice answered, "Good morning, you've reached Carter and Associates. How can we assist you today?" "Hi, I'm Sophia. A friend referred me to you. I'd like to discuss my options for a divorce." "Of course, Sophia. I'm Alyssa, one of the attorneys here. Let's start by discussing your situation in detail." The conversation that followed was both surreal and empowering. Alyssa's questions were sharp and to the point, cutting through the haze of my emotions to focus on the facts. She listened attentively as I described the events leading up to and following the trip that James and his parents took without me. "From what you've shared, it seems you've been facing not only personal betrayal but also a pattern of exclusion and possibly emotional manipulation," Alyssa observed. "Documenting everything was a wise decision. It will be crucial in building a strong case for you." After the call, I was filled with a mix of nervousness and determination. Thinking about divorce was one thing, but initiating the process felt like a major step forward. There was no turning back now. I needed support, and I knew exactly who to reach out to next. Laura, a close friend who had stood by me during the toughest times of my marriage, picked up on the second ring. "Sophia, hi, how are you holding up?" "Not great, Laura, but I'm taking action." I spoke with a divorce attorney. "Wow, Sophia, that's a big step. How are you feeling about it?" "Determined, I suppose." "Laura, can I ask for your help? I might need a statement from someone who's witnessed what I've been through." "Absolutely, Sophia. I've seen how they've treated you, especially James's mom. It always seemed like you could never do anything right in her eyes." "Thank you, Laura. Your support means a lot to me." Energized by my friend's support and the clear direction from the attorney, I spent the next few hours organizing my documents and detailing everything that had transpired. While I worked, my sister Anna texted, her words offering comfort to my weary heart. "Just checking in, sis. You're making the right choice. We're all behind you." By evening, I had assembled a detailed file, texts, emails, and painful reminders, all laid out, revealing my life's raw truths. Instead of feeling exposed, I felt strengthened. Each piece of evidence marked a move away from my past and toward a fresh start. The sound of the front door opening reverberated through the house like the harbinger of a storm. My heart raced, not with fear, but with a firm resolve. As James walked in, his face etched with travel fatigue, our eyes locked. The usual pleasantries faltered, hanging awkwardly between us. "Sophia, you seem different." "I am different, James. We need to talk." His brows furrowed in confusion as he set down his bags. "Talk about what? What's going on?" I gestured toward the living room, where I had spread out the documents and photos, evidence of every moment I felt pushed aside by him and his parents. "James, this isn't just about your trip to Hawaii without me. It's about every instance where you prioritized them over me, every time I was made to feel like an outsider in my own marriage." He looked at the documents, his expression shifting from confusion to worry. "I don't understand. Are these divorce papers?" "Yes, they are. I've consulted a lawyer, James." "I can't do this anymore." His voice wavered, laced with a mix of anger and desperation. "Sophia, why are you doing this? We can talk it out, go to counseling." You're blowing this way out of proportion. I shook my head, unwavering. It's not out of proportion to want to feel valued, James. Your mother's constant interference and your silent complicity with her, it's suffocating. I'm not just an extension of your family. I'm your wife, or at least I was supposed to be. But I love you, Sophia. I just thought what? That I'd stay silent and accept the scraps of attention you and your parents decided to give me. No, James, this ends now. He began to pace, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration and disbelief. So that's it? You're just going to throw away everything we've built because of a few misunderstandings? They're not misunderstandings, James. They're part of a pattern, a series of choices you've consistently made. And now, I'm making my own. His expression hardened as he glanced at the paperwork once more. If this is what you want, I won't stand in your way. But I think you're making a mistake. I've made mistakes before, I said, my voice steady. Staying any longer would be another one. As he sifted through the papers, his movements slow and deliberate, the gravity of our fractured relationship became unmistakable. This confrontation was painful but necessary, a decisive moment that marked the end of my resignation and the beginning of a new path for me. James, this isn't just about our relationship. It's about me reclaiming my self-worth. You might not understand it now, but I hope you will one day. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that had grown too wide to cross. As he collected the papers, a look of bitter acceptance in his eyes, I felt a mix of sorrow and relief. This confrontation, though heart-wrenching, provided the closure I needed, the crucial step towards reclaiming my voice and my life. The early morning sun bathed the boxes stacked in my living room in a warm glow, each one meticulously labeled: books, art supplies, memories. Today wasn't just another day. It marked the beginning of my new life in a new city, a concrete step toward the future I had chosen for myself. As I taped up another box, my phone rang. It was Rachel, a friend who had relocated to the same city last year. Her voice was brimming with enthusiasm. Sophia, I heard the big news. Welcome to the neighborhood. When do you get here? Hi, Rachel. I'm actually packing up the van today. I should arrive by tomorrow evening. I'm so ready for this fresh start. That's fantastic. You're going to love it here. And guess what? I've already planned a little get-together this weekend. Consider yourself invited. Laughter bubbled up inside me, light and freeing. That sounds wonderful, Rachel. I really appreciate it. It's been a while since I've looked forward to something like this. After ending the call, I returned to packing, but it wasn't long before another call came through. This time, it was the HR manager from the design firm where I had recently been offered a job. Sophia, good morning. I'm calling to confirm your start date with us. We're all excited to have you on board. How does Monday sound for coming in and getting settled? That sounds perfect, I replied, a smile spreading across my face. I'm really looking forward to it. It feels like just the change I needed. Fantastic. We're confident you'll bring a lot of fresh ideas and energy to the team. See you Monday, Sophia. As I hung up, a wave of accomplishment washed over me. Everything was falling into place, not by chance, but by my own choice. I paused to enjoy the stillness of the morning, reflecting on the journey that had led me here. With the final box sealed, I took one last look around the house that had been my world, filled with both joy and sorrow. Now it stood empty, a blank canvas waiting for its next chapter. But I was ready to create something new, something entirely my own. And with that, we reached the end of Sophia's journey toward reclaiming her life and embracing a new beginning. What do you think was the pivotal moment that set Sophia on her path to independence? Was it the initial betrayal or her decisive move to take legal action? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know which moment resonated with you the most. If you enjoyed Sophia's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Your support helps us bring more stories like Sophia's to you.
My life took an unexpected turn when my husband walked in on me in a compromising situation with another man. The aftermath of that moment was nothing short of catastrophic. His immediate reaction led to a 5-year jail sentence, my family's disdain, and my overwhelming self-loathing for shattering the image of our seemingly perfect family. I often find myself lost in thoughts of regret, repeating the same self-condemning mantra late into the night, especially when the silence in my once happy home becomes too loud to bear. My children, who were once the center of our universe, are no longer here. My ex-husband despises me with every right to do so, and my immediate family is torn apart. I never managed to forgive myself for the selfish act I committed back in 2015, right after turning 39. I now confess that I took my ex-husband for granted. He had always shown me love, complimenting my beauty daily and seeking intimacy regularly. He treated me as an equal, not a queen or princess, for we were partners in the truest sense. Our journey started in high school, and we remained each other's sole and steadfast companion. Everything felt just right. My family adored him, and my brother looked up to him as a role model. He had helped countless people in difficult situations, always the one they called when in trouble. Through the years, he proved himself to be a good man. We were blessed with two strong-willed sons, who, at the time of this incident, had grown into two wonderful young women. But over time, I let myself go, feeling self-conscious about my weight. He continued to tell me I was beautiful, even as we encountered few arguments that were usually about our physical relationship, or rather, the lack thereof on my part. It wasn't that I didn't want to connect with him in that way, but my mood often just didn't align. He understood, and we communicated openly about our desires. However, when I turned 39, my birthday party revealed a new version of myself. I had spent an entire year at the gym, practicing yoga and Pilates, and had managed to transform my body from 180 to 135 pounds. It was a remarkable achievement, especially for someone who had always been a bit heavier. My ex-husband also began his fitness journey, shedding pounds and tumming his body, going from 260 to 225. His desire for me only intensified, and he couldn't keep his hands off me. We went on dates, danced, and took regular walks. He continued to be a supportive partner around the house, and his eyes always conveyed his love and longing for me. It was incredible to think that even after 2 decades together, he still looked at me with such desire, something any woman would cherish. But despite all this, for reasons I couldn't explain, I still found myself unable to reciprocate his affection during that time. I initially attributed my decreased sexual desire to early menopause. Our physical intimacy had dwindled to about 3 times a month, and I was usually a one-and-done kind of person. In contrast, my husband's desire for more was unrelenting. He even suggested couple counseling as a solution, but I stubbornly declined, allowing my selfishness to cloud my judgment. The turning point arrived when a new manager joined my office a few days after my birthday. He was a bit younger and undeniably handsome, and for some inexplicable reason, he developed an interest in me. I initially brushed off his advances, but as time passed, my indifference transformed into casual conversation. Eventually, he started flirting, and I revealed my wedding ring. Yet, after 2 months of constant flirting, I found myself reciprocating, sharing details of my life with him, and, to my dismay, thinking about him more and more. In hindsight, I realized it was the beginning of an emotional affair, but at the time, I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. My husband began to sense that something was amiss. We had a heated argument about it, which, in my mind, began when he tried to kiss me. I unintentionally made a disgusted face, not directed at him but rather at the thoughts of this other man who occupied my mind. A week after that incident, I decided to meet the new manager at a cafe with the intention of telling him to stay away, that I couldn't continue this. However, before I could utter a word, he kissed me, and my thoughts went blank. That marked the commencement of our 6-month affair. During this time, I found myself doing things with this man that my ex-husband had longed for. I was more eager, more willing, and constantly in the mood. It felt like a new and exciting experience, and as a result, my intimacy with my husband suffered. Although we did have occasional encounters, my behavior toward him grew increasingly critical and belittling, and I'm filled with shame when I reflect on how I treated him during that period. It wasn't until my brother came to visit and revealed that my ex-husband had confided in him about his deepening depression and thoughts of separation that I snapped out of it. He believed that I no longer loved him and that he was falling out of love with me. This revelation jolted me back to reality. I immediately ended the affair, resigned from my job, and resolved to make my husband feel loved and wanted again. I had resolved to fix my marriage, to become a better wife, but the universe had other plans. One day, My affair partner unexpectedly showed up at my house, carrying a box of office belongings I had requested. We spoke briefly. He saw answers, questioning what he had done wrong. I told him I needed to mend my marriage and asked him to leave. However, he pleaded for one last encounter, and foolishly, I agreed. We retreated to the guest room, where our liaison took a tragic turn. I lost track of time in the heat of the moment. Suddenly, my affair partner jerked back violently, and there was a deafening bang. As I sat up, I saw my ex-husband standing there, his eyes bloodshot, tears streaming down his face, lips trembling with pain. My affair partner lay on the floor, and there was a gaping hole in the wall. In the chaos that ensued, my ex-husband and affair partner clashed violently. I screamed, trying to intervene, but desperation led me to jump on my ex's back, resulting in me being thrown to the floor. Everything blurred for a moment. When I regained clarity, my ex-husband had my affair partner pinned down, and he was on the phone, his face a mask of determination. Moments later, the police arrived, handcuffing my ex-husband, while paramedics tended to my severely injured affair partner, who needed reconstructive surgery on his face. At the hospital, I faced a barrage of emotions from my family: my father's silent, shaming gaze, my brother's furious accusations, and my mother's misguided attempts at comfort, which only fueled my father's anger. My affair partner's wife also confronted me, revealing a truth I had been oblivious to: he was married. This revelation added another layer of guilt and remorse. In the aftermath, my boys stayed with their grandparents, refusing to talk to me. My daughters were equally distant. My ex-husband, too wounded to see me, refused my attempts to visit him in jail. Despite my brother's efforts, he ensured my ex was transferred to a correctional facility, where he would serve his sentence, a stark reminder of the irreversible consequences of my actions. To keep an eye on my ex-husband during the trial, I asked my brother if he could relay a message for me. His response was bitter, telling me to go to hell. The trial marked the first time in 3 months that I saw him, and the anger in his eyes cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. Even in our angriest moments, he used to look at me with love, but during the trial, it was pure hatred. Overwhelmed by the emotions, I excused myself to the restroom to cry. As the trial days passed, I was forced to recount my affair in agonizing detail for everyone in the courtroom to hear. When I mentioned the duration of the affair, my ex-husband looked utterly crushed, and my father stood up and walked out in disgust. During his testimony, I learned that he had come home to surprise me with lunch and a romantic weekend trip for 2 in the Catskills. He had meticulously planned a romantic getaway, only to walk in on us, and his reaction was visceral. He later explained that, upon seeing us together, the affair partner ordered him to step aside, and my ex-husband snapped. He violently beat the affair partner, only stopping when he tossed me away. My ex-husband quickly called 911, and the courtroom played the recording of his voice, filled with pain and sobs, as he followed the operator's instructions. It was a heart-wrenching moment. The affair partner couldn't verbally testify and was heavily medicated, so they displayed images of his injuries, which made me physically ill. I felt responsible for this man's severe injuries, as my ex-husband had smashed his eye socket, cheekbones, and destroyed his jaw to the point where the bone fragments were too small to reconstruct. My ex-husband was subsequently charged with a 3rd-degree felony and sentenced to 7 years. This decision led to protests from my sons and anguished cries from my daughters and his family, a sound that still haunts me. The first 3 months that followed were torturous. I was sued by my affair partner's wife for alienation of affection, and my ex-husband filed for divorce. My eldest son moved out, while the other son withdrew into his room, and my twins rebelled fiercely. My former sister-in-laws physically attacked me in a store, and my ex-husband's mother spat in my face when I tried to apologize to her. My father and brother refused to speak to me, and even my lifelong friends were divided over the situation. I eventually had to find a new job since there was no money coming in, and I had almost depleted our savings. I was essentially blacklisted in my field due to the negative publicity surrounding the trial. so I resorted to working in retail and took on a seasonal position as an H&R Block adjuster during the tax rush. I came perilously close to losing our home, and my ex-husband refused to allow me to visit him. Every letter I sent was returned unopened, and crying in the shower became almost a daily ritual. My parents' marriage was strained as my mother persistently defended me, while my brother continued to ignore my existence. It was a bleak time, and even my lifelong friendships began to crumble. Dark thoughts of ending everything began to creep into my mind, contemplating a way out of the unbearable pain. I carried the weight of guilt on my shoulders, watching my belongings disappear as I drifted into isolation. The burden became too much to bear, eventually leading me to seek help from a therapist. She didn't mince words. She scolded me, telling me that I had grown complacent in my relationship with my ex-husband. I hadn't seen him as a husband, but more like a friend with benefits, and I had treated him as such. She was right. I had taken him for granted. Nearly a year had passed, a year of silence from my children. When I cooked dinner, they would quietly collect their food and retreat to their rooms, refusing to even glance in my direction. I had my share of meltdowns, begging them to speak to me, but it was met with silence. My brother got married, and I wasn't invited, though my kids were. I continued trying to visit my ex-husband, hoping he would add me to the visitor list, but I was consistently denied access. My letters remained unanswered, plunging me further into depression. Then, out of the blue, my brother showed up at my house. It was the first time he had visited since the trial, and he was clearly unhappy. He came to scold me, emphasizing that my ex was in the infirmary after a violent incident. An inmate had attempted to sexually assault him in his cell, resulting in my ex-husband getting stabbed in the stomach and the inmate suffering a broken spine. My brother's words cut deep, and I cried for days, acknowledging that in many ways, I was responsible for this outcome. I made persistent efforts to visit my ex in the infirmary and continued writing letters, but they were consistently returned. For 4 more years, I tried to reach out to him, with no success. Thankfully, our children visited their father frequently, and it was through them that I learned he had been placed in protective custody by my brother after the attack. Over the years, my eldest attended the same college as my ex-husband and pursued the same major, but he only maintained contact with his siblings. He had no desire to speak to me or visit our house during the holidays, choosing instead to spend time with his grandparents. My other son followed a similar path, going to the same college and refusing to contact me. As for my twins, they were hard on me, but their visits to their father improved their mood. Whenever they became excessively rebellious, their uncles stepped in to set them straight. My brother and I still hardly spoke, despite my attempts to reach out. I even tried to visit his wife when they had their first child, but I was asked to leave. My mother continued to keep me informed about the happenings in their lives, while my father maintained his refusal to acknowledge me. Then, at the beginning of May this year, my children returned home, seemingly happy, a rare sight that brought a glimmer of hope. I didn't understand why, and at that point, I didn't even care. My children were back home for 4 months, and I did everything in my power to show them how sorry I was. Although I was mostly ignored, they were talking to me, and those conversations brought immense joy. Finally, I was able to know what was happening in their lives. My eldest had been dating a woman for over a year. My second-born was excelling on a college track team, and even my girls were starting to talk to me again. Witnessing their smiles, hearing their laughter, and sharing meals together felt like a cherished dream I never thought I'd experience again. I missed those moments deeply. Towards the end of August, I was eagerly preparing for the twins' first day of their senior year, which also happened to be their 18th birthday. I enthusiastically shared my excitement about their upcoming birthday party, telling them all the plans I had in mind. But without hesitation, my girls asked if we could celebrate it on a different day. I was confused. I thought we were making progress. When I asked why, one of them bluntly said, "Because Dad is throwing us a party, and I don't want you near him." Her words stunned me. I inquired when their father was released, and they informed me that he had been out since the end of April due to good behavior. The news shattered me. He was back in their lives, and they seemed happier because of it. It wasn't our healing they were enjoying. It was having him back. I asked where he was staying, and they revealed he was living with my brother. Driven by desperation, I tried reaching out. I attempted to call him, went to his place holding all the letters he had returned throughout the years, and glimpsed him briefly through the door crack. I cried out his name, but my brother promptly asked me to leave. I handed him the letters and departed. As I reached the driveway, I heard his voice and turned around, only to be met with his cold rejection. He handed back my letters, emphasizing, "You forgot this." My pleas fell on deaf ears as he walked away. My children, witnessing the scene, stared at me, their eyes void of love. In that moment, I realized that my children were merely tolerating me. Despite the overwhelming odds, I still clung to a sliver of hope. I wanted to fix this, to tell him how profoundly sorry I was for my selfishness, for destroying what we once had. I longed for the chance to express how much I missed him, how deeply I regretted my actions. I yearned for him to forgive me, to talk to me, to be by my side again. I wanted our family reunited, but deep down, I knew I didn't deserve it. Even if, by some miracle, we were reunited, it could never be the same. My selfishness had irreparably altered everything, and I wished I could turn back time and undo the damage I had caused. Now let's delve into the opinions from the community. Opinion number 1 expressed deep sympathy for your ex-husband, highlighting how your own account revealed emotional abuse and dismissive behavior toward a man who always made you feel loved and desired. This person emphasized the importance of surrounding yourself with friends who hold you accountable for your actions, rather than those who condone your behavior. They advise you to work on yourself and seek therapy to move forward. Opinion number 2 offered a stark perspective, suggesting that it might be best for you to stop trying to reconnect with your past family, as your attempts could be perceived as harassment. The advice was to acknowledge the irreparable damage and respect the boundaries set by your ex-husband and children. Opinion number 3 emphasized the gravity of the situation, pointing out that your children cut ties with you due to the severity of the events. They stressed the need to respect your ex-husband's choice to distance himself and advised you to focus on moving forward, improving your relationship with your children, and being realistic about the future. This opinion emphasized the importance of accepting the situation rather than holding on to unrealistic dreams. As for the viewers, they were encouraged to share their thoughts, subscribe, and like the video to support the channel. The overall sentiment expressed was one of understanding the tragedy of your situation, but urging you to accept the reality and move forward for the sake of your own well-being.